Hello everybody, I hope you're having a great holiday season. I wanted to just give a quick update on everything going on with the channel. I still have a few projects that I'm working on. They've been a little slow going, but I'm hoping to get one up by the end of the week. And also I have the new merch up for the remake of Forest of a Thousand Legs that I'll be posting soon. Since we're coming up on Christmas, I thought it'd be fun to do a compilation of Christmas themed stories for you all. And also, a little fun side thing about this is that I made this little intro about 10 years ago. It's kind of like a little, it was called a Very Dark Somnium Christmas, and it was just this little 1 minute long intro I would use when I post around Christmas time. So I'm going to play that first, and then we'll get into the stories. But just before that, I would like to tell you about today's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book appointments. With more than 100,000 providers across every specialty from primary care to dental health. Personally, I've been looking to meet with a therapist because I personally have ADHD. I'm not sure if many of you know about that, but I decided recently to stop taking the medication for it for health reasons. And so I've been trying to meet with a therapist to figure out ways of handling it without medication. And places like ZocDoc can really help you get in touch with people like that. I used to try other websites to try to find somebody, but every person that I would meet would be like, oh, I'm not free for like 4 or 5 months. I'm not taking new patients until like next year. But on ZocDoc, you can find people in network that are pretty close by, it just seems a lot easier than most normal ways of trying to find either doctors, therapists, dental workers. And it doesn't just stop there. They also do dermatology. It's really any sort of like medical care, healthcare, they cover it. And appointments can be made in as little as 24 to 72 hours. So if you've been trying to find a healthcare specialist, no matter what field it's in, I would suggest checking them out. Go to ZocDoc.com/darksomnium, and you can instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/darksomnium. And this message is sponsored by ZocDoc. I'd like to thank them for sponsoring the video. I hope you all have a great day. I need to talk. I really need to talk. The trouble is, I don't have anybody I can talk to. My family's estranged, my friends are all gone, and the authorities think I'm a lunatic. It's just a few days from Christmas, and I'm alone, isolated. If I don't get this off my chest, though, I'm afraid it's going to start festering in my mind like a decaying carcass. I'm afraid it's going to sink its teeth in. So, I'll talk to you, all of you. It's not perfect, but it will do. My name is Terrence Sims. I'm sitting in my rocking chair, rifle draped across my lap, in blood-stained pajamas that still reek with last night's piss. I haven't slept in 2 days, and I might not sleep for 2 more. Last night, something came down my chimney, and I think it's coming back. I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me paint you a picture. I live alone, up in the mountains, where the pine trees are draped in snow and the rivers are an icy blue. I could be a bit more specific, but I don't think it's warranted. Besides that, I like my privacy. All of this to say, where I am isn't important. What matters is what I have to say. I'm a researcher, or at least I was once upon a time. My funding has long been cut, and my job along with it, but I've stayed out here because I believe in the research my team was undertaking. It was revolutionary. It meant the possibility of bridging worlds, of seeing new forms of life. Now I'm terrified that research has found me. You've probably heard of monsters, or urban legends, of things that claw at your imaginations and lurk in the dark recesses of our minds. Perhaps you've even felt one. They wait there sometimes, prowling just beyond our vision, tearing at the fabric that holds our realities together, desperate, hungry. My job was to study these beings. I was tasked with developing an understanding of not only what they wanted from us, but how to gain access to their world, the place beyond the veil. Needless to say, I wasn't successful. The organization I worked for, the facility, poured millions into my ideas and wasn't forgiving of my failures. When my theories came up short, they cut ties with me. He cut ties with me. "It's unfortunate, but it's business," Mr. Reed had said, feet on his desk, long hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Your failures reflect on me, Terrence, and they've become an accounting nightmare." I had begged him, groveled. It didn't matter. I was terminated along with my research, and when you're studying the kind of things I am, they don't want that information leaking out into the world. It's what they call a liability. I was blacklisted. Facility teams picked away at my reputation, whispering in the back corners of universities and at the water coolers of laboratories. My name became synonymous with paranoia and madness. I was a laughingstock amongst my peers. A joke. It was the end of my life. Only one person cared to associate with me afterwards, a junior colleague and a brilliant young man named Alexei Asimov. He believed in the research nearly as much as I did, and lucky for him, his name wasn't attached to the project. When the facility pulled the plug and dragged my name through the dirt, they simply moved him to a new department, and that was that. Despite it, he spent his vacation days returning to the mountain, assisting me with further study whenever he could. Until last year, when even he abandoned me too. But now, I've shown all of them. I've proven they were wrong, dead wrong. It's here. He's here. I always suspected he lived among these mountains, or at least that his bridge was located within them, but I had given up hope for so long. It had been years, after all. Damn near a decade. They called me a bastard. Insane. Then, last night, everything changed. I was lying in bed, winding down after logging the readings on the temporal measurement equipment, when the cabin shook. At first, I thought an avalanche had struck, but then I heard it, a clatter of hooves upon the roof. I shot out of bed, my breath trapped in my chest and my body cold with sweat. I sprinted to the closet and pulled out my hunting rifle. Outside, a blizzard howled, but all I heard was the voice, a menagerie of tone and emotion. High and low, guttural and smooth. It rang out from above. My first thought was to contact the facility, but my satellite internet wasn't functioning in the storm. Even if it were, I knew better. I was too far, too isolated for help. The mountains I study in are remote, and the cabin even more so. It was chosen for its seclusion as a means of observing the being known as the Slay Father. But the circumstances were meant to be different, much different. Above me, the ceiling creaked, and dust drifted down the rafters. Boots crunched upon the snow-caked roof. You always think you'll know what to do when the moment comes, that your training will kick in and you'll just go through the motions like some kind of pre-programmed robot. I wish that were true. I really do. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I'd spent the better part of my career chasing that monster, and now that it found me, I was lost. My fingers played upon the trigger of my rifle, my dry mouth and my eyes latched open. Inside of me, my body thrummed with terror. My fight-or-flight response oscillated between cowardice and impulsive foolishness. I was paralyzed, alone. A chorus of chattering pierced the screaming wind. It came fast and jittery, like a ticking clock marking time in microseconds. I knew what it was before the hoofbeats followed. It was them, the creatures the Slave Father commissioned in the first days when people still feared the night and all the horrors within. 8 abominations stitched together by the innards of mutilated children. Their agony acted as his gateway, his bridge between worlds. The souls of the children lived on in the beasts while their vacant spirits stalked the earth, lost and hopeless, seeking the missing piece that would finally grant them rest. Their tortured existence was his link to our reality, the sleigh the abominations drew, his bridge. The thought shook me from my trance. I'd spent years waiting for this, a chance to see the other side, to see other worlds. I had to act, so I lurched forward, moving through the lonely cabin while the Slave Father's footsteps creaked above me. He lumbered toward the chimney while I shivered down the cold hallway, rifle trembling in my skinny arms. It took me only a few moments to reach the living area, and when I did, I settled there, just behind the corner of the wall. I kept my gun leveled at the fireplace and my eyes plastered open. A crackling blaze danced within the hearth. It cast the sparse furnishings in an orange glow, throwing shadows across the loveseat and the messy desks. The night became still. The snowstorm quieted. The hoofbeats vanished. There was no sound of boots, no sound of laughter, only the snapping flames and my heart pounding blood through my skull. My mouth moved. The words spilled out. Affirmations. "Come on," I muttered. "Slide down the chimney, you beast. The fire's waiting for you." I knew better. Of course I did. I'd spent years researching the Slave Father, consumed tireless hours reading into his history. All of the monsters the facility had dealt with, the terrors that haunted old email chains, and the urban legends that spread through panicked breaths. He was the anomaly. He was celebrated. Santa Claus, they called him. It was an error I traced back to centuries ago, when a young girl witnessed her abusive father taken by the Slave Father. The creature devoured him and left the man's skull as a parting gift, having taken what he came for, a human soul. To the girl, the beast was a savior, a saint. The words she spoke in the following weeks, months, and years became immortalized. They became history, and then they became legend. A jolly being, laughing and hungry, coming down the chimney and leaving gifts in his wake. It was as tantalizing a tale as they come, especially to young children, eager to be appeased in their search for comfort and joy. Now he was here with me, looking for another soul to add to his collection. Seconds stretched into minutes as I waited, tucked quietly behind the corner of the wall, rifle in my arms, elbow steadied upon my knee. Once we had contingencies for this, plans in place that provided the means to incapacitate the Slave Father should he pay us a visit, but those plans involved government agencies no longer in my employ. They involved expensive technology and complex spells. They were a last resort. A clump of snow fell down the chimney, and the fire responded with a hiss of steam. Its flame retreated for a moment, flickering before lashing back in anger. Something heavy shuffled above. The Slave Father. Emotions swam inside of me. Regret, anger, fear. Why had I stayed out here? How could I have been so stubborn, so goddamn arrogant? The answer was obvious. My old boss, Donovan Reed. His mockery, his wanton destruction of my life. It left me with no other option. Either I remained on this mountain, burning through my life savings and hunting wayward game, or I returned home. One meant a chance at redemption. The other guaranteed humiliation and disgrace. I hated Mr. Reed more than words could say. Alexei had seen it. He'd seen how much my loathing distracted me, and so he recommended methods to help get the snake off my mind. "Write a list," he'd said in an email last month. "Write a list of all the ways you want to hurt him. Write a list of all the horrible things you want to happen to him. I think it could help you get him out of your head and free up your attention." It helped. A little. The laugh came high and low, husky and slick. A crunch followed it, like something digging into brick, and panic found its way into my bones. Dust and debris fell into the flames. The slave father's legend was explicit in his form of entry. If possible, it was always the chimney. A grunt came down the flume, followed by more pebbles and stones. Then the cabin shook. It was as if something heavy had jumped from the roof. And what comes up must come down. Pulverizing cacophony filled the night like cannon fire. Rubble tumbled into the blazing hearth while the bricks of the chimney bulged outwards, crumbling as something massive shot down it. I barely brought my rifle on aim before a figure crashed into the flames. Burning logs shattered with a thunderous crack, plunging the cabin into inky darkness. Wooden splinters ricocheted around the room like blazing shrapnel, their slivers slashing at my face and tracing my skin in searing agony. I swung back behind the protection of the hallway wall, rifle clutched to my chest. My thoughts raced. This couldn't be happening, I said to myself. It couldn't. I slammed my eyes shut, trying to get my out-of-control breathing back in line. I was hyperventilating, panicking. I had to calm down because if I didn't, I would start making impulsive decisions, and impulsive decisions were a good way to die. I opened my eyes. The fire was gone. I could barely see a thing. A short distance away, boots groaned against hardwood, kicking past broken logs in the hearth. My finger quivered against the cold steel of the rifle's trigger, and I desperately wanted to pull it, but I knew that if I did, then it was over. Either the slave father would die or I would. The odds, I decided, were not in my favor. So I waited. A piece of me, infinitesimally small, wanted to see him, wanted to flick on a light or blinding fire into the darkness. I wanted to witness the monster that possessed my life for so long, if only for a second. But I didn't. It's not worth it, I told myself. It's not worth it. The footsteps stalked to the window, dragging something heavy behind them. Against the faint light of the moon, I made out the slave father's silhouette. He was tall, inhumanly so. His neck craned forward, pressed against the top of the high cabin ceiling. A cloak was draped across his broad shoulders, and from his head slumped a palm of a stocking cap. Beside him sat a large sack.
Naughty or nice?
His voice hummed in discordant melody. I didn't reply. It seemed impossible, but a part of me held on to the belief that maybe he wasn't speaking to me. Maybe he didn't know I was there. It was just a monologue, perhaps, words for the night. I raised the rifle, aiming it towards his massive figure. I could do it now, I reasoned. I could pull the trigger and hopefully make this nightmare disappear. The silhouette turned, his face masked in shadow, save for a single glint of bobbing light.
Careful with that,
it said. A cold breeze swept across me, and suddenly my fingers burned with agonizing frostbite. My rifle clattered to the floor while my hands trembled in pain.
You'll take your eye out.
What do you want? I stuttered, stumbling backward. My feet croaked on the floorboards as I came up against the back of the hallway. My heart hammered, tears filled my visions as I cradled my cold hands against my stomach. Please, I whimpered.
Naughty or nice?
He sang. Nice? I said. I'm a good man. I just wanted to learn about you. The words stumbled out of my mouth like lemmings falling to their death. I don't mean any harm, I swear. The footsteps creaked closer, and as they did, the silhouette vanished from the window's moonlight. All that remained of it now was the sounds it made. I listened intently to the burdensome echoes of boots on hardwood and the heavy scratching of coarse fabric being dragged across the floor. He was so close, so close. I slammed my eyes shut, waiting for the inevitable, waiting to die. Warm piss spilled down my leg, and my face screwed up as I fell to my knees, bawling on the floor. Please, I begged. I'm a good man. I told you, please. The rumble of footfalls stopped, and in their place came the sound of rustling fabric, like somebody opening a sack.
Nice, you say?
A dim light formed, radiating out of a burlap bag some 5 feet away. Behind its glow, I could make out a white, single beard hanging over a red suit. The Slave Father's face was otherwise indiscernible amidst the suffocating shadow, save for one dancing speck of light.
Would you like a gift?
He asked. My mind raced. Was there anything in the mythology that warned against accepting gifts? I couldn't recall. Yes? I hazarded in a small voice. Yes, please. It seemed unwise to refuse the creature. A massive red-jacketed arm reached into the burlap sack. My eyes widened in horror as I realized the sack was moving, kicking, like there was something alive inside of it. Muffled screams followed, and the great arm pulled back, clutching a man by his long blonde hair. The man thrashed and whimpered, tears soaked his pale face. Our eyes connected, mine and the man's, and something ran through me. It was a feeling I'd never experienced before, a mixture of dark excitement and absolute loathing. You, I said slowly. The light from the sack was dim, but to the man, it was all he had known. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the heavy darkness of the cabin, and as they did, he peered toward me, eyelids pinched together to discern the voice speaking to him. Who's there? He whimpered. I gazed forward in stunned silence. Was this real? There was no way. He dangled in the Slave Father's grasp like the finest Christmas present I'd ever seen. Hello? His voice called. Please, I have resources, more than you could imagine. I'm a powerful man in government. Just get me the hell out of here, and I'll give you whatever you want. His voice turned weak, broken. Please, get me out of here. I have a family. I opened my mouth, but if words were there, I didn't speak them. No, it seemed wasteful at this moment to reply so thoughtlessly. This moment necessitated careful words and a measured tone. It required my best.
Naughty.
The Slave Father hummed.
So naughty.
I found myself nodding along. Yes, the man was naughty. The worst. He was an abomination, fit for disposal. He doubted me, made a mockery of me, and torn apart the life I'd so carefully built. Donovan, I said, doing my best to keep my voice low. Donovan Reed, isn't it? The light was faint. So faint. In spite of it, though, I could see Mr. Reed had finally realized who I was. Whether because his eyes had adjusted or he recognized my voice, perhaps a combination of the two. His expression fell. That voice. You used to work for me, he choked out. Didn't you? I gazed at him, something horrible growing inside of me. It ate up all my fear, my regret, my rage, and it left only hunger in its wake. A desperate desire for retribution. I did. A pause. He sensed it there, in my reply. He sensed the disdain, the hatred. I'm so sorry, he said at length. You were right. You were right about everything. That's true, I said. And you were wrong. Yes, I was. He winced in agony as the Slave Father lifted him higher by his tangled hair, then gently nudged him with a giant clawed hand. Mr. Reed swung like a pendulum. You were right, he continued weeping. He's real. Of course he's real. Are you... Am I what? I interjected. My hands, still burning with frostbite, became an afterthought in my mind. The warm piss in my pants hardly registered to me. I was beginning to build the puzzle. I was beginning to understand what this was. Are you asking me if I'm going to help you? Silence. Of course I'll help you, I said. I'm not a monster. Why would I ruin your life all because you made a simple mistake? In the quiet of the cabin, Mr. Reed's shuddering tears struck the floorboard like gunshots. Thank you so much. He hardly sounded like the man I knew. If he weren't swinging in front of me with his obnoxiously long hair and his fitted suit, I'd almost have doubted my own ears. He sounded weak, cowardly. I'll ask the Slave Father to release you if you can do one thing for me. What is it? Anything. Your research is back on the table. Of course it is. You're brilliant. Look at you. You saw this before any of us. You knew it was out there and... What's my name? I'm sorry? His words, once thundering like a roller coaster, crumbled into a heap. Look, I'm not in a position to remember every employee's name. That was years ago. You need to be reasonable. I took a step forward, and the floorboards creaked. I understood what the situation was now. It was written in the subtext of the legend, the unspoken and unwritten words that undercut everything about the slave father, a singular concept, one still celebrated to this day. Holiday cheer. I reached out a hand, gripping Mr. Reed by his silky black tie. His swinging stopped, and I pulled at the accessory, making him choke and gag. Are you He sputtered. You crazy? His face had lost the fear, the concern, the false remorse. In its place was something much more familiar. Malice. I let him go, and he gasped as his breath returned to him. His eyes shifted to the being behind him, the instrument of his destruction. The slave father remained still, clouded by darkness, with only his massive arm and singed white beard illuminated by the dim light spilling from his bag.
Naughty or nice?
The monster repeated in that discordant voice masquerading as song. My eyes connected with Mr. Reed's, and an irresistible smile crept along my lips. To see him there, helplessly dangling by his hair and a slave to my whims, filled something inside of me I didn't realize I was missing. It filled a need for power, a need to be respected. Naughty, I said, surprising myself with the tone of authority. Donovan Reed is a terrible man. No! Mr. Reed screamed, even as the great red arm lifted him up to the rafters of the ceiling. His face screwed up in agony as the slave father gripped his legs with the other hand. Please! He shrieked, horizontal in the air. Please, I'm sorry! I'm so... His words were interrupted by the wet splatter of his intestines striking the cabin floor. It was hard to see in the darkness, but easy to hear. I listened as the slave father pulled Donovan Reed apart, one end from the other, his innards slapping against the ground like spoiled fruit. Why? Mr. Reed's last word died on his lips as the slave father slammed both pieces of him against the cabin floor, drenching me in an explosion of blood and bone. When it was finished, I sat in warm, wet silence. Donovan Reed's blood dripped from my mess of hair and soaked through my thermal pajamas. Something akin to a near-death experience flashed before my eyes, except it was aspects of my life and research. I always believed the slave father to have been little more than a simple reaper, a monster hungry for souls or other forms of mortal sustenance, piecing the veil once a year when its hunger grew too insatiable to ignore. I had been wrong. Much of the Santa Claus mythology fitted the slave father, more than I or Alexei ever expected. He didn't just feed on souls, he fed on people's joy, their mirth. It appeared as though he required both pieces to be fully satisfied, and such a phenomenon provided much more context to the original myth. That girl, 2 centuries ago, had been joyous when the slave father devoured her father, hadn't she? And now, I had been joyous when he'd gifted me my revenge. I'd felt ecstatic watching Mr. Reed die. The cabin began to tremble, and soon the very floorboards snapped and the windows rattled. It felt like it was being torn from its foundation. I steadied myself against the wall as a blinding light exploded from Donovan Reed's skull before quelling to a gentle gleam. It snaked around the cabin, revealing the full extent of the building's disarray. Tables had been upturned, documents littered the floor, and the fireplace had become little more than a pile of bricks and a frigid breeze. Shafts of moonlight pierced through the hole in the ceiling the chimney once occupied, revealing Mr. Reed's blood and bones scattered all over. The cabin was soaked in his blood. Then, the floating light passed across the slave father. It revealed a behemoth, clad in crimson cotton with white trim. 2 legs burst from the long red jacket coated in coarse, black fur that ended in leather boots. As the light swam upward, I caught sight of the creature's arm scratching at its barrel chest. Its fingers were thick, human but decaying. What I had earlier mistaken for claws were actually long, curled fingernails. Thank you, I breathed. Thank you for this.
'Tis the season.
It sang with a laugh. The orb of light ascended towards its mouth, and for the first time, I saw the monster's face. It was human, but mangled. Above its white shock of beard were 2 pieces of coal, seared into its eye sockets. The skin of its face was discolored, a pockmarked mess of swollen, blistered flesh that sagged around its skull, and its nose was little more than 2 slits, with the faintest impression of bone jutting from beneath. Burns, I realized. This face had been burned beyond recognition. As the tiny orb of light finished its ascent, it revealed the Slay Father's red stocking cap. At the end of it was a white palm, and it blinked. It was looking at me. An eyeball twitched where the palm should have been, glimmering like a star in the night. It seemed clear to me that the creature meant me no harm, and so the researcher inside of me took over. "Can I ask you?" I began, before being cut off by a roaring sound of wind. The Slay Father had opened its mouth, and within its jaws a blizzard roared, frigid and horrible. My hands, anguished with frostbite, became numb and unresponsive. My ears screamed, and my nose throbbed. My entire body ached with the stabbing sensation of absolute winter. Then, the light orb vanished, sucked up inside the Slay Father's mouth, and so too did the cold. I heard what sounded like a gulp and a swallow, and then another discordant, tuneless round of Darkness returned. The Slay Father turned. His twinkling eye vanished as he did, and began walking away from me. His lumbering footfalls crunched along the cabin floor, snapping pieces of Mr. Reed's bones as he made his way back to the demolished chimney.
Merry Christmas to all,
the Slay Father sang. I heaved a breath, warmth returning to my extremities. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in decades, I felt full of Christmas cheer. So much so that I even finished the rhyme for him. And to all a good night. His boots stomped, and the floor groaned as he turned back to me, that bouncing eye gleaming in the night.
Merry Christmas to all,
he repeated, though his voice had lost its whimsy.
I'll see you in 2 nights.
My jaw fell open, the smile dying on my lips. No, that wasn't right. Why would he come back? I already had what I wanted. Mr. Reed was dead. The Slay Father turned around toward the chimney, chuckling to himself. Hang on! I spat, my voice cracking. You don't have to come back. It's fine. Seeing you was enough. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy, that I was right.
Naughty,
he hummed.
Or right.
I blinked, not understanding. That wasn't the rhyme. Nice, I said. Not naughty. I'm nice. A good person abused and taken advantage of, just like that girl you saved, remember? His laughter echoed around the ruined cabin.
Naughty and right. I'll see you in 2 nights.
He stepped into the remains of the ruined chimney. The shafts of broken moonlight framed him through the broken ceiling. His beard upturned with a smile, and then he bent his great legs and leapt upwards with a grunt. A moment later, the ceiling trembled, and pieces of rafter crashed down around me. Above, I heard the Slay Father's chorus and his heavy boots crunching on snow. Then came the whip of reins and the rapid chatter of 8 abominations preparing to take flight. Their hooves pounded against the roof in anticipation. 2 more whip cracks and the cabin rafters whined as the sleigh began to move, slowly at first, before the monsters broke off into a rumbling gallop. Through the shattered ceiling, I caught sight of the godless creatures taking flight. They were monsters in the truest sense of the word, pieces of children chopped up and reassembled into beasts of burden. Some had 6 legs and 1 arm, others 3 heads and 4 feet upon 2 legs. As the last remnants of the Slay Father's laughter faded in the distance, I idly wondered if he purposefully designed the beast to be more hideous than himself. I chewed on the thought as I stumbled toward the kitchen, grabbing a flashlight from the drawer and flickering it on as I went. I used it to locate a blanket and a laptop, and then took a seat in the old rocking chair. With the blizzard gone, the night was uncharacteristically warm. Whether or not that was a consequence of the Slave Father's visit, I couldn't say, but I was thankful for it. It made thinking easier. I flipped the computer on, and my face was bathed in a blue glow. I noted the satellite connection was back online. Good. My fingers rocketed across the keyboard, sending out multiple emails to my contacts at the facility. "I've done it," I told them. "I've proven the existence of the Slave Father. Not only that," I added, "but he told me he was returning in 2 days' time. We can acquire his sleigh, his bridge." I hit send, exhaling a sigh of relief. I truly had done it. I'd redeemed my name. I'd resurrected my reputation and executed the monster that murdered it in the first place. It had been a busy night, an important night. I fully believed the Slave Father would return for me, but with the facility's resources, I suspected we could handle him. Their warlocks could do wonderful things with spells. My computer pinged with the first email alert, a reply from the facility's hiring manager. I figured, why wait? I had a job to return to. The sooner I got paid for my work again, the better.
"Good evening, Dr. Sims.
It read,
Your work for the facility has been greatly appreciated. Unfortunately, we have located another talent that has proven more reliable. Your contract will not be reinstated."
I stared at the screen in confusion. What? Had they even read my email? I just told them I located the damn Slave Father. I had just explained how I found the bridge between worlds. Cursing, I began typing my response. 2 more email alerts pinged in the corner of my screen, distracting me. No matter, I thought to myself. The hiring manager can wait. I clicked on the first new email. It was from an old colleague of mine, Anna Ling, a former team member from the Slave Father Research Project, and one with high-level security access. "I'm so sorry," it read. "Take care, Terry." Sorry? Did she think I was insane? I clenched my fist, my frustration mounting at the thick-headedness of these idiots. I was sitting on possibly the most significant discovery in the history of mankind, and they were brushing me off like a common madman. Bitterly, I clicked on the third email. It was from the Director of Research and Development, Mr. Reed's boss.
"Good to hear from you, Terrence. First off, I'd like to say we're recommending you for the Medal of Merit. Your work has been incredible and, dare I say, worthy of certain additional awards down the line. Can you say Nobel Prize?"
I paused, a smile forming on my lips. This was more like it. I always found the Director of R&D to be shrewd and clever. It was little wonder they saw the potential in this opportunity as soon as I presented it. I continued reading.
"Of course, public awards are off the table until the bridge has been put under proper use. We'll have to deal with upcoming conflicts first, before spilling the beans on this new technology. But trust me, once we can, your name is going in the hat. I'll personally be recommending you. I imagine you're probably a little upset. It's a terrifying prospect, what's to come, but..."
I blinked, shaking my head in confusion. Terrifying. That's an odd way to describe a Nobel Prize. No matter. I continued reading.
"Unfortunately, it was the only option we saw available. Dr. Asimov has been a huge help in getting all of this set up, and we're genuinely thankful for your cooperation in this matter. What's losing another 30 years of life when you'll be immortalized in history, eh?"
Dr. Asimov? Alexei Asimov? What the hell? That couldn't be right. Alexei abandoned the project a year ago. Sure, he'd occasionally kept up with me via email, more for my sanity than anything, but he had nothing to do with this. His mental exercise of listing my intrusive thoughts helped clear my mind some, but that didn't warrant such accolades. I did this. Me. Furious, I clicked reply. Before I could finish the first word of my response, my computer pinged with another email. It was the last contact I'd messaged. Alexei.
"Terrence, I hope you're well. In fact, I suspect you're feeling quite good, if not a little confused. I know how much the Slave Father project meant to you. To be frank, your obsession with it has concerned me. It isn't healthy. It's damaging. Before I go any further, I'd like to assure you that the facility will be arriving at the mountain later this evening. They'll be monitoring you from a safe distance, and when the Slave Father returns in 2 nights' time, they'll attempt to apprehend his bridge."
I let loose a sigh of relief. Good. I knew I could count on Alexei. Even if he was trying to steal some credit for this. I cracked an exasperated smile and kept reading. It was probably a misunderstanding.
Earlier this year, I discovered some lore I thought might help both of us, you and I. You see, old friend, I have come to realize that the Slave Father shares more in common with the Santa Claus myth than either of us recognized. All those weeks, months, and years of study and failed attempts to locate the monster were rooted in a singular problem. We were too focused on the science. The Slave Father is a being that transcends science, of course, an anomaly, a myth. So it was to that mythology I returned. Within it, I found the means to quell some of your suffering and offer you an opportunity to have a Merry Christmas before you pass from this world.
My fingers ached. I realized I was clutching the sides of the laptop hard enough that the plastic shell began to crack. I reread his words. Before I pass from this world. What kind of phrasing is that?
Trust me, Terrence, it will be better for you this way. Easier. I know you're probably wondering what I'm talking about, so let me provide you with some background details. I discovered that lists have the power to summon the Slave Father. They act as a sort of ritual or an offering to it. When one creates a list, the creature will sometimes deign them with their request, providing they want it desperately enough. It is our emotional energy that calls to the Slave Father. It feeds upon our joy and our sorrow, our wishes and fears. Your list to Donovan Reed was drenched in emotion. I suspected that if my theory was correct, given your relative proximity to the Slave Father's bridge and your hatred of Mr. Reed, you could provoke an encounter with the being. I'm happy to hear I was correct in that regard.
My eyes scanned his words, and my teeth dug into my lip. That son of a bitch. That absolute piece of shit. I made to get up and grab a new piece of paper, one I could use to write Alex's name on it. I'd listed 1,000 times, with 1,000 different ways I wanted him dead, but the email wasn't finished.
Of course, there's more to the Santa Claus mythology than simple lists. There are consequences. One such consequence is when somebody requests something selfish or sufficiently deplorable. It is the naughty or nice paradigm, and we see it reflected heavily in the mythology. It's what I was counting on tonight. Your desire for Mr. Reed's death was selfish and frankly monstrous. You'll excuse my dry sense of humor, but it really was a naughty sort of thing. I'm genuinely sad to know Mr. Reed passed with such brutality, but I'm happy to know it will pave the way to ending the coming war and saving billions of lives. When the Slave Father returns to claim your deplorable soul, please know that it was never something I wanted. If you could have lived, I would have preferred that. Same too with Mr. Reed. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and sacrifices must be made. The Eldritch Horrors are knocking on our front door, Terrence. You know that. You know I had no choice. Just know that you and Mr. Reed will be remembered for what you gave. Carpe diem, old friend. P.S. If at all possible, please draw the Slave Father as far from his bridge as you can. Our team will have an easier time retrieving the sleigh that way. Happy holidays, Alexei.
I closed the laptop. I didn't even bother writing a reply. What was there left to say? Screw you, asshole? No, it wasn't worth the energy. I doubted he even cared to read it. He already got everything he wanted, after all. He had me right where he wanted me, and now he would get all the credit. That son of a bitch. I stewed in my rage for a long time, long enough that birds chirped overhead and the golden light of dawn seeped in through the cabin window. Eventually, I decided what would happen next. You would. All of you. See, the Slave Father might be coming for me tonight, and it might be true that I don't have a way out of here. The facility is too powerful, too all-reaching, but not even they can stop the wildfire of public outrage. So, here it is, my testament, the true account of the final days of my life and the research that led to them. I'm not asking to be deified. I'm not even asking for a street in my name. I just want people to know the real story of what happened out here on this snowy mountain. You'll forgive me for not trusting the facility to represent my contributions to this project properly. They've already spoiled my name once. Who's to say they won't keep dragging it through the dirt after I'm dead? Words are cheap, and I know better than to trust emails from Suits, so I'm begging you to spread this far and wide. Tell my story the way it truly happened, warts and all. I'm not a perfect person, but I'm not a madman either. The slave father came to me. I witnessed him. Not Alexei, me. Tonight, when the creature returns, I won't even run from my death. I'll lead the bastard away, just like that snake asked. It'll be my final contribution to my life's research, a contribution I hope might lead to a better world someday. If they manage to steal the sleigh, then it'll be a colossal boon in the war to come. If they don't, well, just be careful what you wish for this Christmas. Some gifts aren't worth the price. Christmas has always been a hard time for me. I've never felt the warmth of family coming together or the anticipation of opening gifts. I've never gone to midnight mass or experienced the thrill of sitting on Santa's lap and telling him what I want. I've never helped my mother make gingerbread cookies or gone caroling. But Christmas isn't hard because my life has lacked those holiday essentials. No. Instead, it's because of the memories that surround that annual celebration. The reminder of what I went through, of what I've seen. I'm getting ahead of myself. It happened when I was 6. I was living with my mother. My father was out of the picture, just a hateful name on my mother's tongue. I never met the guy, and to be honest, I never wanted to. Why would I want to develop a relationship with someone who abandoned my mother and I before I was born? So, it was just the two of us. 2 quiet souls just trying to make the most of our meager lives. We lived in a small house on the edge of town. My mother worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford a sitter, so I spent a lot of time alone in the house. She made me swear secrecy and not tell anyone at school because she was afraid social services would take me away. Looking back, they probably would have if they found out. But they never did, and I spent a lot of time in a world of make-believe. I had to. We didn't have a television or even a radio, so if I wanted to escape somewhere, it had to be in my head. I didn't mind because I didn't know any better. I spun worlds and characters, imaginary friends, and silly things that little boys fantasize about. I'd come home from school, make myself some cheese and crackers, the kind of cheese you'd squirt from a can, and launch into my world of make-believe. I was a space warrior, a pirate, and a soldier, anything I could think of. I'd run around the house fighting aliens or the enemy, shooting at them with imaginary guns or fighting them back with invisible swords. Eventually, the sun would set and I would end up asleep in my bed. My mother would come home around 10, check on me, kiss me on the cheek, and then rush back to her other job, which kept her busy until after 3 a.m. So you see, she didn't have a lot of time for me. She didn't have time to get us a Christmas tree or decorate our house or anything. Christmas was just another day for me. But, God, I wanted it to be so much more. I got so jealous listening to the kids at school talk about their presents, the sleigh ride they went on, their visit to Santa at the mall. I became hungry for those things. I wanted them more than anything else. I wanted to play in the snow and come rushing back inside to a cup of hot cocoa and listen to jingle bells while I warmed myself by the fire. It was all so festive, so magical. Now, I don't tell you these things for you to pity me. I don't care about that. I'm telling you this so you understand why I did what I did. About why I went to Christmasland. I stirred in my bed and listened to my mom shut the front door behind her. My cheek was still damp from her kiss, and I knew she had just left to go to her second job. I rubbed sleep from my eyes and bundled up in my covers. It was cold, my breath pluming out before me. Mom must not have been able to pay the heating bill this month. As I tried to go back to sleep, my mind wandered. It was only a couple of days until Christmas, and I dreaded listening to everyone at school gloat about their presents and all the cool stuff they got. Buried under my blankets, I started to drift. The house was silent and dark, my bedroom door opened to reveal the barren living room.
Hey kid.
The voice shattered the serenity like a hammer on glass, and my eyes shot open. My heart began to race in my chest as I tried to determine if I had imagined the voice or not. Mom had just left. I was supposed to be alone.
Hey kid, come over here.
I sat up, breathing fast. I hadn't imagined it that time. It was a male voice, low and deep but inviting. It had come from the living room.
It's okay. I just want to talk to you for a second.
Swallowing hard, I slid off my bed and tiptoed to my door. I peeked around the corner, trying to see through the black. Had Mom brought a friend over and left him here? I thought about turning on the light, but for some reason, the thought scared me. What if I didn't want to see whoever was out there? What if it wasn't one of Mom's friends?
Over here, by the fireplace.
I squinted toward the ashy, empty space against the wall. I didn't see anyone. I was a mess of trembling nerves as I crept towards where the voice had come from, keeping my head on a swivel. I stopped in front of the fireplace, scratching my head.
That's better. I'm up here.
I jumped, taking a step back as the voice echoed from the chimney. As I settled myself, my mind began to spin. Who was up there, and how had they gotten there? The only person I knew who came down chimneys was Santa. Fear subsiding, I knelt down and cocked my head up under the fireplace to look up the chimney. Dangling from the darkness was a long, charred hand. It hung motionless like a dead pendulum. Long fingers hung like silent chimes, the skin as dark as soot. The hand was attached to an incredibly thin wrist that disappeared into the black.
Hey, kid.
The hand said from no visible orifice. I just stared at it, mouth dropping open. What the heck was this? And how was a hand talking to me? And what was it doing in my house?
You're pretty brave, not running away.
The hand continued, still motionless in the air.
Most kids see me and book it. Not you, though. You're a tough guy, huh?
I shrugged, still not sure I was awake and listening to a hand in my chimney.
Well, let me cut to the chase. I heard you like Christmas. Is that true?
I told the hand it was. Still unmoving, the hand continued.
Well, that's great, because I have a surprise for you. If you want, I can take you to a magical place called Christmasland. In Christmasland, it's always snowing, just like the North Pole. Not only that, there are also hundreds of dazzling Christmas trees like you've never seen, and Christmas lights all throughout the sky. Oh, they're beautiful. Christmasland is full of little boys and girls just like you. Does that sound wonderful? Don't you want to see it?
I shifted in my empty living room, curiosity pushing aside fear. That did sound good. That sounded like exactly what I wanted. As strange as the offer was, as bizarre the circumstance I found myself in, I felt pulled to comply. It was a nagging in my head, a whisper behind the voice I heard. I bit my lip and thought about my mom. She wouldn't be home for a couple hours. She didn't have to know. The hand swayed gently.
I promise to have you back before your mom gets home. You want to see the lights, don't you? You want to play in the snow.
That I did. And honestly, I was so desperate to experience Christmas that it didn't take much to convince me. I told the hand I would come, making it promise to take me back before 3. It promised. Smiling hesitantly, I reached up and grabbed the hand, which was now opening its fingers. On contact, I felt something jolt through me, like a quick blast of icy wind. I gasped, and I heard the hand whisper something to itself from the darkness.
Take us.
Before I could respond, the hand gripped mine, and I was lifted off my feet in a rush. Darkness blasted around me, and I squinted, my eyes watering. I could smell ash invade my nostrils, the chimney squeezing in tight around my shoulders. The hand never let go, and we kept soaring up and up and up. Up far too long. We should have reached the end of the chimney by now. And then I audibly gasped as light exploded across my vision and heat rushed in to wrap itself around me. I blinked, wind tearing my eyes, and I realized I was falling. I was falling and the hand was nowhere to be seen. I started to scream, realizing I was falling towards the earth from high up, impossibly high up, and everything was wrong, all wrong. I expected to see my house, my neighborhood, a dark landscape below me, but what I fell towards was nothing like that. I fell towards charred earth and dusty mountains. I fell towards pits of fire and empty wasteland. I fell towards a mass of something wriggling and screaming. As terror poured from my mouth, hair slapping across my face, I saw that I was falling towards a massive net dangling over the earth, filled with screaming children. When I registered what it was, I only had a second to cover my head before I smacked into them. My breath was crushed from my lungs and I felt bones break under me as I made contact with the other kids. I felt my shoulder scream with pain and I wriggled on top of the pile as hands reached for me, tried to get me off them. Faces stared up at me, terrified, tear-streaked faces. Confusion and horror crashed together in my young mind like two trains on the same track. I didn't know where I was, what was happening, or what I had just fallen into. I kicked at the hands grabbing me, frantic to be free from their touch. There were hundreds of kids below me, most of them crushed and dead from the weight of those above. I rolled over and pressed my face against the mesh, looking below us. Blood dripped from the bottom of the net and I could hear the slow grind of breaking bones in the air. And then the net began to move. I gripped it and pulled myself into a standing position, face pressed against the fibers, desperate to see where I was going. The vision that awaited me still haunts me to this day. We were hanging above a vast plain of red earth. Foothills rolled below us, empty of forest or foliage. Rock formations jutted from cuts in the dirt like emerging infections, sharp angles and dangerous surfaces. Ash rained from a crimson sky, a constant curtain of never-ending flakes. It looked like snow. Walking across the expansive plains were dozens of towering, naked, sexless humans. They rose hundreds of feet in the air, all silent with eyes that looked glazed over as if they were asleep. They were rhythmic in their movement, order to their steps. They worked together, all across the horizon, bringing down nets and emptying them into colossal piles. Dozens and dozens of human mountains scattered across the horrific world. Bleeding Karens that screamed and howled in the wind. I watched in devastated horror as the children were emptied from the nets and tumbled down the piles, still fighting to get away. Even as they did, one of the enormous humans would come forward and kick them back, killing them in the process. When the piles were high enough, an enormous blazing rock was set at the top to begin a slow burn down the mountain of flesh. In a sick way, it reminded me of a star atop a Christmas tree, the orange and red stone lighting the pile with disturbing colors. As it burned away the bodies, a thick black smoke wafted from the death and rose up and up, high into the sky. My bloodshot eyes followed the dozens of plumes of smoke toward the heaven, and for a second time, my breath was robbed from my lungs. Stretching across the expanse of the sky from horizon to horizon was an absolutely titanic human body. It was naked, like those below, but its skin was pale, almost white. Its hairless torso peeked in and out of the black smoke and cloud covering, winking down at us from an impossible height. Its head was bald and its moon-sized eyes were closed and unmoving. Its mouth was a long line across its face, a pasty trench of overwhelming size, and it just hung above us all, still and silent. Peeking across the colossal body was the broken remains of a destroyed galaxy. Half-alight planets and stars hung miserably across the vermilion heavens, entire worlds cracked and crumbling through the solar system like blazing comets. And that's when I noticed something. I noticed the motionless body in the sky was absorbing all the smoke and death through its nostrils, like black holes sucking in all matter. And the more it breathed in, the more it began to take on color. They were trying to wake this thing back up, revive it from whatever state it had fallen into. Before I could even digest all this, our net dropped and I was falling once again. I heard my voice join the others, screaming, howling. We were being emptied into a new pile of children. I hit the squirming mass with a thud and felt myself slide and somersault down it. Hands clawed at me as I tumbled, rolling further down, until finally I was at the base of the flesh mountain, The ground shook as one of the massless, sexless humans approached, carrying a blazing boulder. Me and the other children began to run, hauling away from the pile as fast as we could. I didn't know where, but in the distance I saw spires. I headed toward them. The giant holding the boulder kicked at us, and 2 of my companions were destroyed instantly. Tears pouring from my face, I ran and ran and ran. I could hear roaring behind me, a great bellow of fury at my escape. I didn't stop, didn't care that I couldn't breathe, didn't notice the burning in my throat as I inhaled ash and soot. The ground shook, and fire blazed, and hell was all around me. The spires formed definition, and I realized as I sprinted closer that they were chimneys, sprouting from the earth like broken tunnels. Hundreds and hundreds of chimneys of all shapes and sizes. Together they formed a field of stone and brick, stretching for acres and acres, nets hovering above them from spikes the size of skyscrapers. As I approached the chimney, I noticed that children were shooting out of them like bullets, only to fall into the waiting nets. I didn't have time to feel sorry for them as I reached the edge of the chimney fields. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to escape this nightmare. Tears rolling down my cheeks, I scrambled up the shortest chimney I could find, brick licking my skin and drawing blood. My ruined fingers dug into tiny holes, and I pulled myself up, weeping until I was sitting at the lip and looking down into the darkness below. Sobbing, I said a prayer and took one last look behind me. The titan in the sky had opened its eyes. The wind suddenly whipped across my face, and suddenly I was deafened by a great roar that shook the heavens. The giants below fell to their knees, hands upraised, as the very vault of the universe began to open and shift, shaking reality in an explosion of color and sound. Gripping the top of the chimney, screaming into the gale, I rolled forward into the open jaws of darkness. I fell down, deep into the long neck of the chimney, and listened to the world end and be reborn behind me. I fell until all I knew was darkness. When I eventually woke, I was laying in the middle of the road, surrounded by police, paramedics, and a very concerned crowd. Red lights flashed across my blurred vision, and I blinked back black. Questions rained down on me, worried voices that became jumbled to form a roar of noise. I looked down at myself and saw that I was covered in blood and ash, my clothes hanging from my body in burned shreds. I fought against the paramedics trying to shove an oxygen mask over my face and screamed for my mother, the fear and horror consuming me. I blacked out soon after. I woke a few days later in a hospital bed, my mother's tear-streaked face staring down at me. Mercifully, she held her questions back. Instead, she hugged me tight and kissed my face, whispering her love. It wasn't until I was released a few days later that I was told what had happened. According to the people who found me, I had suddenly appeared in the middle of a highway 3 states over from my house and home. It was a miracle someone didn't hit me with their car. My mom took me home and for years didn't ask questions. She knew something horrible had happened to me, and I think she always suspected someone had come and snatched me from my bed and dumped me in the road. I let her believe that, despite the contradicting timeline. I've never fully recovered mentally from that night. How could I? I witnessed something no man was ever supposed to possess memory of. I saw something that defied everything. Where had I been taken? Where was it now? Was it some distant future or some alternate plane of existence? And just what was that thing in the sky? And where is it now? I can't stand to be back here. This tiny, rural town I grew up in. It makes my skin crawl to see everything around me. I'm well into middle age now, but it's like this town has been frozen in time since I was a teenager. And the older I get, the more things that in childhood seemed warm seem to radiate with freezing cold. The more things seem to hide teeth and claws and menace. I'm standing in these woods, the ones across from the house I grew up in, and I fall back into memories so easily. Everything is frozen, everything is the same. just a little more. It's like something's wrong with the daylight here. My brother James likes things from the woods. Animals, birds especially. When we were children, we used to go out into these woods almost every afternoon, looking for them. Birds. We just watched them, and he was so amazed, so in awe of these creatures. He never even got too close. So gentle. He just look up at them, appreciate the fact that they were there. And then he met Billy and Michael and Peter, and then he started shooting the birds. My mind goes back almost 30 years. I feel like I'm right there. Like I'm right there. These woods will do that to you. I think back to that night, the first night that James... I'm sitting at the family dinner table. I'm 17. I count the bodies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count the chairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count the bodies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where's my brother? Where's James? My sister says he went out with his friends to the woods, she thought. My mother says she doesn't like to see him out after dark. 13-year-old boys should be home eating their dinner, not in the woods at night. The food's getting as cold as the air outside the house. Still, no James. It's getting late. It's getting later. No one's seen him. I breathe in and out and in and out and in. Hold my breath. Time crawls. No James. I walk to Peter's house. The wind is picking up. The night is black. No moon. No nothing. My sister thought he was with his friend Peter. In the woods. In the woods, Peter said. We were running, laughing. We were in the woods and we were trying to catch rabbits. We were in the woods trying to shoot a deer. We were in the woods, but then we left the woods, he tells me. We parted ways, and I went to baseball practice, and Billy went to the store, Michael went home to his mother, and I don't know where James is, says Peter. I don't know, but he's not in the woods. The sheriff is called. They're all looking. Mother is sobbing, father is drinking. My brothers and sisters are in and out of the house looking. Help them, father says. You're 17, you're a man, almost. Look with them, help them. But I'm stuck to the chair, and I'm staring out at the trees. I'm looking out to the part of the woods I can see from our window, and I hope to God, I hope that he is not in the woods. He knows these woods. He knows them. One day gone, and I look out at the sun starting to bleed through the trees. No sleep, eyes open. Mocking sun in the morning teased. One night gone, one night gone. One night gone and no sign of James. The things in the woods. My mind cycles through the things in the woods. It cycles through everything soft and sweet, everything that eats plants, everything harmless before I think of the wolves. Oh God, the wolves. I stand out at night yelling, staring at the woods, staring at the trees. Maybe if I squint my eyes, maybe if I look closer, I'll see him there waiting. James! James! I call, echoing out into the black night. Where has the moon gone? Dogs bark and wolves howl. No one stops my own howling. I yell until my throat is raw and red and slashed up inside, until I fall asleep in a bed of dying leaves that crackle as I shift in the night. 2 days gone. Taunting sun following me all day, saying, 2 days, 2 days, and 2 days, you'll never see him again. Your brother's eaten up, your brother's eaten up. The wolves will come for you as well when I set. They comb through the woods and I wait and wait. Nothing. It's been too long. He knows these woods. He knows them, and the wolves know them too. Peter is helping us search. I asked him which way James was headed when he saw him last. Home, he says. He was headed home. Peter ducks behind a tree and starts crying. I know he's scared. I leave him there. I come back in 10 minutes and his eyes are dry and he's ready to press onwards, but we see no sign of James.
That taunting sun on the evening of the third day, and the moon comes out. The moon we haven't seen for days. In the darkness, I can make out a shadow coming toward the house. The outline of a person walking strangely, limping, staggering. James? James, is that you? No, not James. It's not James. It's a woman. The strange woman that lives in the decaying cabin on the other side of town. People come to her when they can't find things, rings or keys or books, and she closes her eyes, she draws a map, and people always find their rings or keys or books. Sometimes people ask what their futures will be when they will die, and she always says that she doesn't know. She can't do that. She says all she can do is find things. Years ago, people say she saw 3 drowned children, in her mind, drowned in cold, deep Echo Lake. All young, but she didn't know who, and she didn't know when. She tried to warn the town. She tried to warn them all, but she didn't know who, and she didn't know when, and no one listened. And they let their children play in the lake, and the children were fine. And then, one night, Mae Jackson, the preacher's wife, dragged her 3 children down to the lake. She said she had the voice of God in her ear, telling her to bring her children to him. The next morning they found them, all 3 of them, drowned in that cold, deep lake. But the strange woman that lives in the decaying cabin on the other side of town says all she can do is find things. She staggers up to our doorstep and hands me a crudely scrawled map. The woods, and an X deep in the heart of the woods. She walks away toward that moon as it crawls up the night sky, that same staggering, hunched movement. She turns back. Don't go alone. I race into the house and breathlessly show the map to my brother and father, to the sheriff. No words. We all tear through the woods, branches breaking, flashlights dying, running, and I can't breathe. And I can't breathe, and don't let him be torn apart. And I can't breathe, and don't let him, and don't, oh, please, no. Oh God. Oh my God, there he is. Wolves. It wasn't wolves. Bullet through his chest. I didn't realize I had run ahead, and my father and brother and the sheriff are still running, and it's just me, and it's only me, and I'm holding him, and everything is so cold, and the ground is red. Lung punctured. When the doctor comes, he tells me James didn't die right away. Catching rabbits, hunting deer, guns. Peter is crying in our living room. It was a mistake, he sobs. All the other boys had left. The gun went off. It was a mistake, and it hit him through the chest, and he said get help, but I knew he didn't have much time, and I didn't want to go to jail, but he said please help me, and I didn't know what to do. And he was already cold, getting colder, and the ground was so red, and I didn't know what to do, and I left him there. Baseball practice. Peter left and went to baseball practice. He was in shock, and he left James there to die, to soak the ground blood red. And he picked up the baseball bat and left him there. And he ran the bases, and he left him there. And he hit the ball, and he left him there. And he left him there, and he left him there. I leave Peter there, in the living room. My hands are shaking, and I can't be in that room. I can't. I don't know what I'd do to Peter, but I can't be in that room. And everything is red, and everything is cold. My brother, 13. My brother, gone. Something shifts in the trees next to me, and just like that, I'm back in the present, back in this strange fading daylight. 30 years of time crashing back onto me like brackish waves. Nothing happened to Peter. Peter grew up. Peter found himself a wife, and Peter had himself some children. And Peter found a job, and Peter bought a house, and Peter grew up. Peter gets to grow up. James doesn't. I get to grow up. I find myself a wife. I have myself some children. I find a job. I find a house. I grow up. I grow up, and James is in the ground. I move away. I can't stand to be near those woods. I grow up. and I stop believing in people that can find things they've never seen by closing their eyes and drawing a map. But I think about that woman, and I think about James, and I think about Peter, and it brings me back here, back to these woods, back to this place, as the strange daylight dies through the trees. Wolves got him, I thought. Wolves got James. Before I knew about what Peter had done, I thought wolves got him. I wasn't entirely wrong.
Jess steadied her breath as she saw the buck. She was behind a fallen log dug deep into the blanket of snow that lay across the ground. She brought her rifle up to her shoulder and rested it on her cover, moving ever so slowly as to not startle the buck in the clearing. She felt the wind blow her hair behind her head. She had positioned herself downhill of the animal as to not give away her position with her scent. The buck had broken from the herd, which were moving through the dense woods past the clearing, all of whom were most likely searching for water or any other source of food that hadn't been claimed by the snow. A 3-day-long blizzard had passed a few days ago, and Jess knew the animals would need to drink and eat, just like her and Frank. Their supplies had been cut short by the unexpected storm, and they needed more desperately. Normally, Jess wouldn't be hunting alone in such a harsh environment. However, that was their only option, as Frank had become ill. While it wasn't life-threatening, he certainly wasn't in any position to be doing anything in the bitter cold, much less hunting. Jess didn't mind. Helping her husband was something she always prided herself in doing. Jess peered through her scope and steadied her aim on the buck's body, just over where his heart would be. She saw the buck tilt its head towards her before suddenly darting out of the clearing and through a thicket of trees, followed by the rest of the herd. Jess didn't move at first, confused as to why it had been startled so quickly when she hadn't moved. She planted the butt of her rifle in the snow and began to pick herself up as a bright light shone in her eye. She looked down her scope, seeing the sun's reflection off the glass.
Buck must have seen the glint and got spooked.
She cursed quietly to herself.
Need to get this thing off after I find him.
She picked up her rifle and began to move toward the clearing, breaking from her concealment behind the log. Jess moved to where the buck had been standing just moments ago. Kneeling to the ground, she saw tracks planted deeply in the snow. A faint smirk crossed her face. Finding that buck again wouldn't be any trouble. She had hunted game with trails far more indiscernible many times before. Jess got up, slung her rifle over her shoulder, and began to follow the tracks. The forest she trekked through was laden with snow. The heavy wind had sent several branches to the ground and had even taken a few weaker trees down. Several inches of snow covered the ground, covering the entire forest in a thin blanket. The large tracks she left behind made Jess feel exposed in some way. For all she knew, something could be hunting her as well. However, Jess had some comfort. She moved her hand down her thigh, placing it against the holster wrapped around it. She wrapped her hand around the grip of the gun that lay in the holster. The revolver was chambered in .50 caliber, more than enough to bring down anything. Frank had bought one for both of them after a close encounter with a bear a few years prior. The same that left Jess with a large scar prominent across her back and part of her shoulder. She was lucky Frank had been there, else she would have never made it out of those woods. Eventually, Jess found the buck, although now he was behind a few trees, not nearly as exposed as the clearing. The rest of the herd was now with him, making the shot even harder to pull off undetected. Very slowly, Jess moved, keeping concealment behind trees as much as she could. Eventually, she found a point where the buck was fully visible. She lay prone on the ground and slowly laid her bag next to her. Opening it as quietly as she could, she pulled out an Allen wrench and brought her rifle close to her. She unmounted her scope, all while keeping eyes on the buck in case he moved or noticed her. Soon, Jess had the scope off and began to line up her shot. She had to be much more careful now. The buck was roughly 20 yards away, a shot that she had to make with only her iron sights. She hoped to bring it down in one shot and didn't want to chase a wounded animal through the snow. As Jess was still lining up her shot, she saw the buck peer over to where she was laying. Jess thought it was about to bolt again. Panicking, Jess fired her rifle, not knowing whether she had struck a hit or not. The herd all ran together as Jess cursed herself for being so careless. She quickly picked up her bag, slung her rifle, and ran to the tracks. Among the several footsteps that lay in the snow, Jess saw drops of blood. The bullet had made contact, most likely by the buck's leg. It wouldn't be able to run for long. Jess ran after the trail. She knew the animal was going to collapse soon if it hadn't already, and she needed to be there soon after it did. The screaming of the buck would be a dinner bell to any predators in the area. The last thing Jess wanted was to have her kill stolen, as she had already been hunting for several hours. Jess sprinted through the dense forest, her rapid breath visible in front of her. Branches and other debris cluttered the ground, all of them covered by a veil of snow. Jess couldn't afford to lose any time, much less an ankle were she to trip on something and land wrong. Jess knew she was close. There was only a single set of tracks now. Soon she heard the buck, wailing in pain. Jess began to slow down and reached into her bag. She began to get her rope to tie the thing up and drag it back. There was no way she'd be able to carry a full-grown buck all the way back to her house. She also got her hunting knife out from her pocket. After all, the animal would have to be dead before it could be moved, and a quick mercy kill was the best Jess could offer. Jess broke through part of the forest and into another clearing. She stopped, looking down at the tracks, following them with her gaze. Eventually, it landed on the buck, laying on its side toward the edge of the clearing. It was kicking its legs, yelling, though it had become quieter now. Jess moved toward the animal, readying her knife. The buck saw her as she got close. It began to kick its legs harder, trying in vain to get up and run. Jess knelt in front of it and, with a saddened sigh, plunged her knife into its neck. The buck screamed one last time before going limp. Jess always hated this. She never liked making an animal suffer more than it had to. The only condolence she could give the animal was a faint
Sorry.
before removing her knife. Jess got her rope from her bag and began to tie the carcass. There was no other way to move it beside to drag it. Eventually, she wrapped it tight and tied the rope to her bag to act as a harness. She got herself situated and began to walk back home. Jess knew these woods well. She and Frank had hunted in them for many years, and she knew how to get back home from anywhere. Even if she were to get turned around, she could always just follow her own footprints, as there hadn't been any more snowfall since she left. Jess hiked back through the woods, dragging the large buck along with her. Her legs ached due to the strain caused by the weight of the animal along with the snow that crippled parts of her movement. However, she ignored the pain and kept moving, focusing on the thought of her own survival and, more importantly, that of Frank. Jess made it back to the clearing where she saw the first buck. She looked back at her own tracks as well as those of the animal she had now carried with her. However, something seemed off. By the clearing, she noticed an extra trail, one that she didn't believe had been there when she had chased after the buck. She took off her bag and went towards the trail. She arrived and inspected the tracks. They appeared to be that of a deer. However, they were larger, maybe twice the size of normal tracks. They trailed off to where the herd ran. However, the distance between the prints indicated that the animal had been moving slowly, calmly, nothing like the prints of a frightened animal. Jess didn't know what to think. In all her years of hunting, she had never seen prints that large on something that seemed to be a deer. She didn't believe Frank had either. She immediately wanted to go after the tracks, to find whatever creature had left them. However, she still had the buck, one that she needed to get back home before something else claimed it, whether it be an animal or decomposition. Jess couldn't let the kill go to waste. She decided she'd head back home, maybe ask Frank about the prints, see if he'd ever seen anything like them. If they were that of a large deer, the amount of meat on the animal could keep them fed for up to a month should they ration it properly. Jess grew excited at this thought and made up her mind. She'd rest for a day, and tomorrow she'd go back out and see if she could find the animal. She would have to dispose of the buck's carcass anyway. Might as well try to find whatever was out there. Jess trekked back to her bag that lay in the snow. Small flakes of snow speckled the top of it. Quickly, she went back to the strange tracks and took a mental note of their direction. The coming snow would most likely cover their tracks. Jess didn't plan on losing whatever made them. She followed the tracks with her eyes as they exited the clearing and back through the woods, following those of the other deer. Jess went back to her bag and picked it up, slung it back around her shoulder, and began to drag the buck the rest of the way home. Eventually, Jess made it back to her house, smoke emanating from the chimney. Jess smiled. Frank was awake and seemed to have gotten some of his strength back, enough to get up and move around the house. Jess went to the small shed that lay a few yards from the house, dragging the carcass along with her. She pulled the buck inside and let it rest in the middle of the room. It was secure now, and she could leave the rest of the work for a little later, after she caught up with Frank. Jess untied the rope from the carcass and her bag before putting it back away. Jess walked through the door of the house to see Frank tending to the fire. "Back so soon?" Frank said as Jess walked through the door. Jess unslung her rifle, propping it next to the door. Jess removed her revolver from its holster, placing it on a small table next to the door.
Frank, I've been out for like 5 hours. By the looks of it, you just got up.
"That may or may not be true," Frank said, glancing at Jess with a smirk. "Managed to get anything?" Jess took her bag off her back.
Yeah, I got a buck. Pretty big one, too. I'll skin it in a few. I need a break.
She laid her bag on the floor in front of their couch before laying down on it. "Coffee sound good?" Frank said, looking over his shoulder at her.
When does it not?
Said Jess, returning Frank's gaze. Frank nodded and moved to the counter where their pot laid. He made Jess her brew and gave it to her. "Finish that up, then go work on the buck. I'll clean your rifle in the meantime."
Is that really necessary? I only fired one shot.
"Come on, Jess. You know that's my thing," Frank smirked. Frank wasn't wrong, and Jess knew it. Caring for their guns was something Frank always loved doing, and he always looked for any excuse to do it. After any trip they went on, any expedition, Frank made sure their weapons were clean and pristine, no matter how insane the task may seem. Jess smiled, rolling her eyes. Frank took Jess's rifle and went to their dining room table. He already had his cleaning kit ready and waiting. Jess could hear him taking apart the rifle from the couch as she finished her coffee. She then got up, washed out her mug, got her knife from her bag, and moved back out to the door. Jess made it to the shed, the buck still laying in the center. She then got to work on it. Skinning the buck was the easy part. Getting the right meat off of it and making sure there wasn't any bones was much more difficult. The task only took Jess about an hour and a half. Once she had finished, Jess got up and inspected the carcass, somewhat pleased with herself for doing it in such a short amount of time. She placed the last of the usable meat in a cooler that lay in the shed before taking it and rolling it back towards the house. She managed to get the door open, dragging the cooler along with her through the snow and through the entrance. She rolled the cooler to a freezer that lay a bit deeper in the house, just past the kitchen, and put the cooler inside of it. Her and Frank couldn't afford to let a kill go to waste in their state. Jess walked back to the living room, seeing both her rifle and revolver now shining brighter than ever. Jess looked at Frank laying on the couch, who had resigned himself to a book.
I didn't even take my revolver out of its holster until I got back. Did you really have to clean it?
Jess said, shooting a questioning gaze at Frank. "I told you I like cleaning them. Plus, you were taking too long with the buck," Frank replied, a hint of laughter in his voice.
Well, I could have done it faster if I had some help,
Jess said jokingly to Frank. "Oh, but how would my sick body be of any use in that cold? Why, I would just surely die." Frank held his hand over his forehead theatrically. Jess stared at him, shaking her head and smiling. "Now, you haven't told me the story yet," Frank said, lowering his gaze back to Jess.
What story? What story?
"How you got the buck." Jess retold the series of events that had taken place, beginning at where she had found the herd all the way up to when she killed it. However, she then got to the part of the story about the large tracks in the snow. Jess told Frank about the tracks, wondering if he'd seen anything similar before. A puzzled look crossed Frank's face. "No, I don't think I have. You said they were twice the size of normal tracks?"
Yeah, or something like that. I was planning on going back out tomorrow to see if I could follow them. I need to bring the carcass out anyway.
Frank tilted his head towards the window, snowflakes fluttering just outside. "That's gonna be difficult. Snow's already coming back in."
I know where the tracks were leading to. Hopefully I'll be able to find them if they pick up again.
Well, whatever you say. Anyways, are you planning to kill the thing if you find it?
That's the plan, yes. If that thing really is as big as the tracks made it appear, the meat on it would last us a really long time.
I don't know, Jess. It could be risky. If that thing sees you and decides to attack, you could get hurt pretty bad. Jess grinned at Frank.
Hey, it'll be all right. After all, you just cleaned my last resort.
She pointed over her shoulder to the revolver on the table.
I'll be fine, Frank. No need to worry.
Frank returned Jess's grin. If you say so, but if it seems like it's too dangerous, I want you to head back here, alright?
Of course. I'm not looking for both of us to be out of commission here either.
The rest of the day passed by quickly, mostly filled with Jess preparing her bag with more supplies, repacking her magazines, and bringing along one extra just in case. Frank cooked up some of the fresh kill for dinner before both of them went to bed. Jess planned on getting up early the next day. The time on the clock read 6:20 as Jess stirred in bed. She got up and put on her clothes, seeing small amounts of snow still falling. She left the bedroom, got her bag, rifle, and revolver ready before turning back to the bedroom. Frank was still asleep. Jess wrote a small note saying that she had gone out and that she'd be back once she found the thing, or if it got dark. She put it on the bedside table next to Frank, kissed him on the cheek, and then left for the door. Moving out to the shed, Jess noticed that there was less snow on the ground, only about 2 to 3 inches now. Jess was happy at the sight. Less snow would make dragging her kill a lot easier. She once again tied the carcass to her bag, then began to trek back out into the woods. The animal was a lot lighter now that most of the meat and bone had been taken out. Jess walked about half a mile away from the house, a good distance to leave the animal for the rest of the forest to claim. Jess dragged the carcass to a group of trees and laid it in front of them. She removed the rope from her carcass and her bag, putting it back away. She got up and began to follow her tracks back toward the clearing where she had seen the strange prints the day prior. Eventually, Jess came back across the clearing, just as barren as it was when she had passed by yesterday. Jess walked to where the tracks had laid the day before, expecting them to be there somewhat, just maybe not as pronounced as before. She saw the light tracks of the other deer that had run away, as well as those of bigger animals. The tracks were just barely there, but Jess could still see them. She felt more than confident enough in her abilities. She'd be able to find the thing in no time. Jess got back up and followed the tracks on the same route that she had taken yesterday. The loss of some of the snow allowed for her to see more of the ground and the obstacles that lay beneath. This was good. If Jess had to chase the animal like yesterday, she'd be at much less risk of falling, making it much easier. Eventually, Jess made it to the clearing where she had killed the buck the day before. The trail of now dried blood that the buck had left was still pronounced against the pristine snow. However, Jess noticed something else. The tracks of the larger animal were no longer following those of the other deer. Rather, they had turned and were now following her tracks. Jess didn't know what to think. It was strange enough that what seemed to be a deer was following tracks. It was even stranger that it had chosen to follow hers rather than that of the other deer. This also made Jess realize something else, that the thing had most likely been near her when she found its tracks. It may have even followed her back to her house. Following her trail back to the previous clearing proved this theory. Jess could see the thing's trail following hers back home. However, Jess realized a possible way she could use this to her advantage. If it had followed her before, there may be a chance it would do it again. If the thing were already starting to track her, it would soon be at this clearing, not giving Jess much time to get ready. She quickly ran back to where she had finished the buck and posted up against a log facing the opening of the woods she had gone through. All she had to do now was wait. Time seemed to drag on. The next half hour felt like days to Jess, but she never moved from her position. She was dead set on killing this thing. Eventually, Jess saw movement in the tree line. She held her rifle against the log in the ground, steadying her breath just as she had the day before. She watched as an animal moved through the trees into the clearing. Jess was correct in her previous assumption. The deer was at least twice as big as normal. Aside from its size, it appeared to be normal. Even the antlers on its head had a normal number of points. although they were much larger. The animal stopped as it entered the clearing, almost as if it knew something was there. Jess stayed perfectly still, not daring to move even to line up a shot yet, not while it was this alert. The animal moved its head from edge to edge of the clearing. Jess saw its gaze pass her and look off to her right. Jess knew that this was the best chance she had. Quickly, she lined up her sight over the animal's neck. Its gaze slowly turned back to look at Jess. She felt the animal's eyes focus on her, and without hesitation, she fired. The animal's yells could be heard even over the sound of the shot. Jess immediately knew she had scored a hit right on target. Jess saw the animal turn and flee from the clearing. Without a second thought, she gave chase. She was confused at this point, but determined. It seemed impossible that the animal would have survived that shot. The bullet had most likely gone through the thing's torso, hitting several vital organs along the way. It seemed impossible for it to be moving. However, Jess didn't care about the logistics right now. All she knew was that it was running, and she wasn't planning on losing it. Jess followed the thing at a decent pace. The fresh trail was plainly obvious. She knew once again the animal wouldn't be able to make it far after the hit she had scored. There was no point in tiring herself out now. She would need all the energy she could muster to be able to drag the massive animal back home. Eventually, Jess no longer heard the animal's cries. It must have died, and by the looks of the trail, Jess knew she was close. Then, Jess passed up a thicket of trees and saw the animal shaking on the ground. The only thing Jess heard was the snapping of bone and the tearing of flesh. The animal laid convulsing, not making any sound of its own accord. Her eyes widened as she saw the thing's legs begin to split open, revealing pitch-black limbs underneath. The thing's back was torn open as a black mass emerged from it. Its head exploded as two large antlers replaced the ones already there. Jess stared in a frozen horror as she watched a massive creature come out of the deer's body. It stood on two legs. It must have been 10 feet tall, if not even taller, as it was hunched over. Its arms reached down past its waist. Long, sharpened fingers barely avoided scraping the snow it was standing in. Its head resembled that of a deer's skull, the set of antlers resting on top, their ends sharpened to thin points. The entire body was black, though it seemed thin. The outlines of the bones could be seen through its skin. Jess began to walk backwards slowly, never letting her eyes off the thing. The creature then tilted its head toward the sky, letting out a blood-curdling roar. It was deafeningly loud. Jess could feel the ground rumbling beneath her. She was still backing away as the creature yelled, and then slowly turned its head around to face her. Jess stared directly into the creature's eyes. They seemed to be burning bright red, resembling hot embers. Jess then turned around and sprinted away from the creature as fast as she could. Only after she had gotten a decent distance away did she look over her shoulder. The creature was gone. Jess began to slow down, gripping her rifle tight. She kept moving forward, all while turning to scan the trees for any sign of the creature. Soon she did. She saw red eyes staring at her from behind a few trees. Jess raised her rifle, but by the time she did, it had already disappeared. Jess quickened up her pace while keeping eyes on where the thing had been. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it again, staring at her. She aimed the rifle to where it had been, only to be met with the unmoving trees. Jess believed she had an idea of what the creature was doing. It was toying with her. It kept appearing, disappearing, and reappearing to scare Jess and to wear down her nerve. Worst of all, Jess knew it was starting to work. She felt her breath begin to quicken and her entire body begin to shake. She had to think of something fast, something that would allow her to get control of the situation. She turned and saw a pile of branches on the ground about 50 yards away. She had her plan. The next time Jess saw the creature out of the corner of her eye, she waited, not turning to face it immediately. Jess saw the creature emerging from its concealment behind the trees and begin to slowly move towards her. Jess then quickly turned and fired a blind shot at the creature. She saw the thing duck, turn, and run back into the woods. The thing was gone for now, but it would be back soon, and Jess had to act fast. Quickly, Jess turned and ran for the pile of branches, pulling her scope back out of her bag. She remembered when the buck had been startled by the glare earlier, and the best idea Jess had was to make a lure for the creature. She saw a log a few yards to the left of the branches, one big enough for her to lay behind. Instead of taking the shortest route, she went around the left side of the log, then began to move towards the branches. She placed her scope in the pile and pointed it to where her tracks had been. She then began to walk backwards toward the log, slowly, and making sure she only walked in her already existing footprints. She then got back to the log and proned, aiming her rifle towards the branches. Hopefully, when the creature began to follow Jess's tracks again, it would see the glare of the scope and try to get behind it. When it did, Jess would be able to get a clean shot of the creature, one good enough to seriously wound, if not kill it. Jess waited for what felt like an eternity, her heart still racing as she lay still. Any second, the creature could appear from what seemed like anywhere in the woods, and Jess had to be ready for it. She knew she had to get a good shot on it, else she would be at even more of a disadvantage. If she were to shoot at the creature and miss, she would not only alert the creature, but still be on the ground, making it even harder for her to escape the thing should it attempt to chase her. The thought of this made Jess even more terrified than she already was, but then she noticed something that made her heart sink deeper into her chest than it already had. She watched as the vapor from her breath exited her mouth and over the top of the log, plainly visible to anything following her trail. Jess got the looming feeling that something was watching her. Slowly, she turned her head to look over her shoulder. She stared eye to eye with the creature looming over her. Jess screamed as she rolled onto her back, attempting to level her rifle on the creature. Just as she did, the creature pinned her arm to the ground, along with the rifle with one of its hands. Although it seemed frail, it was immensely strong. Jess was completely unable to move her right arm, her dominant arm. The creature then used its other hands to push down on Jess's chest. The creature was beginning to crush her. She could feel air escaping from her lungs as a sharp pain pulsated through her chest. However, Jess was able to pick up her legs and kick the creature in the stomach. The creature let out a small, pained cry before loosening its grip on Jess's arm. Quickly, she took her knife from her pocket and drove it into the arm, pinning her down. The creature yelled louder as Jess twisted the knife. The creature let go of her and grabbed at the knife in its arm. Jess didn't waste any time. She quickly got up and began to run from the creature as fast as she could. She felt the brush of sharp claws on her jacket. She turned her head to see that the beast had just narrowly missed her. It pulled the knife out of its arm, throwing it to the ground, and then began to chase after her. She knew the creature was mad and it was done toying with her. There was no chance she'd be able to outrun it for long, and she couldn't get the distance to hide from it. The only thing Jess could think was to try to shoot it. She turned and fired her rifle at the beast, hoping to hit it in the leg. However, the shot completely missed, and the beast hadn't slowed down. Jess didn't have time to fire again. She turned back around and continued running. She could hear the thundering footsteps of the beast following her closely, but she didn't stop. She knew that if she were to get caught by this thing, there would be no way she'd be able to escape it. Jess's lungs burned and her legs ached. She was beginning to tire, but the creature didn't show any of the same signs. Its pace hadn't slowed down in the slightest, and Jess knew it was getting closer. As she ran through a thicket, a root caught her foot. It had been completely obscured by the snow. As Jess fell, she rolled onto her back, in some vain hope that she'd be able to hit the creature, and was only just able to aim her rifle at the beast. She got one shot off and hit the creature in the chest. However, it didn't slow down. Just as Jess was about to fire another shot, the beast was on top of her. It swiped at the rifle, knocking it out of her hand and sending it several feet away from her. The beast then grabbed Jess by her neck. It lifted her effortlessly off the ground with one arm, bringing her over its head. She tried in vain to get free, grabbing onto the beast's arm with both hands and trying to pull it off. It was hopeless. The beast was too strong. She tried again to kick, but she couldn't land a good hit. The best she could do was a few light taps against the beast's head. The beast dug its free hand into Jess's leg, right below her waist. Jess screamed in pain as it drug its claws down her thigh, slowly. The beast wanted to make Jess suffer. It wanted her to feel the same pain it had felt when she shot it. Jess's death was going to be slow. The beast tore its claws out of her leg, just above the knee. Tears began to trickle down her face as she yelled in pain. The beast didn't move for a moment. It simply watched as Jess tried even harder in vain to break free. Jess's life flashed before her eyes. She saw herself as a young girl hunting with her father again. She saw herself graduating school along with her friends again. She saw herself marrying Frank again. Then she saw the memories that hadn't yet been made. She saw her daughter looking up at her from a crib, her son learning how to walk. She saw herself teaching them both how to hunt, just as Jess's own father had. Seeing these visions constructed a burning will within Jess. She was not going to die in these woods to the hands of some sadistic creature. She was going to make it out. She was going to see Frank again, and she was going to start her family. Just then, Jess remembered something. A trump card she hadn't played, her last chance of escape. Jess removed one of her arms from the beast's grip and moved it to her right leg. She watched as the creature reeled back its free arm. It was planning to strike. Jess got her hand around the grip of the revolver and pulled on it. The fire within the beast's eyes grew brighter as it anticipated the kill. She tore the revolver from its holster and leveled it with the beast's head. Its eyes turned to track the revolver, meeting the barrel just as Jess pulled the trigger. The noise was deafening. The powerful shot had knocked the revolver free of Jess's grip and had been thrown away from her. The beast screamed as it lost its grip on Jess, sending her falling to the ground. She hit the ground hard. Dazed, she looked up to see the creature writhing in pain, its hand covering part of its face. It turned and stared at Jess, the one eye visible now burning with an unimaginable fury. It removed its hand, showing her the massive hole the revolver had blown out of it. A quarter of the beast's head was missing, yet somehow it was still moving. The beast, still crying in pain, began to stumble towards Jess, swinging its arms wildly at her. She turned and crawled towards her revolver as fast as she could. The beast was a lot slower now, only just barely moving faster than Jess while it was on its feet. She could hear and feel the thing getting closer. The revolver was in arm's reach. Jess reached out as far as she could, only barely able to get the revolver's grip. She turned to see the beast close, moving towards her, still flailing its arms. Jess fired twice, both shots entering the beast's chest. It let out a demonic cry, staggered, and fell towards her. She let out a cry of pain as the beast fell onto her legs. Jess dropped the revolver next to her, her wrist in pain due to her frantically poor grip and the power of the cartridge. She leaned forward and tried to push the beast off her. With all her might, Jess was able to get the thing off her, her hands now soaked in its blood, along with her jeans now stained a deep red. Her head was still bleeding heavily, although it seemed to be some miracle the beast had missed her femoral artery, for if it hadn't, she would have already been dead. However, she would bleed out if she didn't stop it. Jess had forgotten to pack a trauma kit in her rush to get to the creature, so she had to improvise. She took the rope out of her bag and wrapped it around the base of her leg. She got the knot ready to be tightened, clenched her teeth, and shut her eyes. Jess pulled as hard as she could, and the rope clinched tight around her leg. She let go of the rope and stopped for a second to wait for the pain to subside. Jess took her revolver from the snow and placed it back in its holster. She tried to stand, only for a sharp pain to flash through her leg. The gash left by the creature made it impossible for her to put any weight on it. Jess saw her rifle laying a few feet away from her. She crawled over to it and took hold of it. She removed the magazine and cleared the chamber. She would have to use the rifle as a makeshift crutch, and she wasn't planning on accidentally shooting herself after surviving this hell. She planted the butt of the rifle in the snow and pushed down as hard as she could, barely managing to lift herself off the ground. The pain in Jess's leg was immense, but she knew she had to get moving, else she would soon die in these woods. Jess limped her way back through the forest. Even in her damaged state, she knew the way back to the house. The makeshift tourniquet on her leg allowed Jess some relief. It had slowed the bleeding, but hadn't stopped it completely. Jess had to ignore the pain and keep moving if she ever wanted to see Frank again, and to have her visions of her family come to fruition. Jess could feel her strength beginning to wane, a combination of freezing cold along with the blood loss. Every muscle in her body burned as she could feel her heart rate begin to slow. Her body was begging her to stop, to take a break and lie down, the cold snow seeming like a warm bed to her. Jess began to lose hope. She still had a long way to go and doubted she'd make it back. She began to slow down, her head now cast downwards to the ground. Then she heard something that made her bring her gaze back up, that made her heart race, something she couldn't believe. Jess, where are you? It was Frank. He had left the house to find her, although Jess had no idea what tipped him off to her being in danger. However, that didn't matter right now. All that mattered was that Frank found her.
Frank! Frank, I'm over here! I need help!
The two continued to call out to one another. Jess could hear Frank's voice coming closer. Eventually, she saw him in the distance. Frank quickened his pace when he saw the state Jess was in. He could see her limping with her rifle, a thin trail of blood behind her. Once Frank reached her, he carefully moved her rifle and moved her arm over his shoulder, supporting her better and allowing her to move faster. Here, I got you. What the hell happened out there?
It was a fucking demon, Frank.
Jess said, feeling tears beginning to well in her eyes. A demon? Jess, what are you talking about? What did this to you?
A demon, Frank. The tracks I saw yesterday belonged to it. It almost killed me.
Jess could barely get the words out of her mouth. She was losing her strength. Well, clearly you beat it. That's all that matters. We'll get back to the house and I'll patch you up. You're gonna be okay. I'm not letting you die on me. Those words gave Jess a faint smile. Even in this dire of a situation, Frank never failed to make her feel safe. However, Jess knew something was wrong. Her vision was fading. Her legs began to buckle. Jess, stay with me, darling. You're gonna be fine. Just keep moving, Frank said quickly, attempting to hide the fear in his voice. It was then that Jess's legs fell out beneath her and she was unable to bring them back up. Frank caught her as she fell. Come on, Jess, you can do it. We gotta go. Frank was becoming frantic. Jess tried again to stand but was completely unable to do so. Jess's vision began to fade as she was completely immobilized. Jess? Through faded vision, Jess saw herself being carried by Frank. She was barely able to hear what he was saying. Everything was muffled. Her vision began to fade in and out with her hearing. She was moving in and out of consciousness. Eventually, through faded vision, Jess was able to see the house. Everything then faded to black. Jess awoke back in her house, or so it seemed. She laid next to a fire underneath several blankets. Beneath her was a small mattress, most likely moved from one of the spare rooms. She tried to get up and move, but a sharp pain was sent through her now stiffened leg. Jess removed the blankets to inspect her leg. The left leg of her jeans had been cut off. Bandages were wrapped tight around the gash left by the beast, stained a deep red. A proper tourniquet wrapped tight just above it. Jess could see that the bleeding had stopped. She called out to Frank. If he were in the same house, he'd want to know that she was awake. No more than a second had passed when Frank came into view. He almost ran to Jess as soon as he saw her, embracing her tightly when he reached her. Jess, thank God. I thought I'd lost you. I thought you'd never wake back up. Frank's voice was broken, tears welling in his eyes. You passed out completely when I got you in the house. I cleaned your leg and wrapped it as best I could and kept you by the fire. I did all I could, but I was still terrified. I think deep down I knew you'd be fine. You always were a fighter. Frank let go of Jess and turned his attention to her leg. Here, let me check your bandages. Frank moved the blankets and inspected the bandages. Your bleeding stopped, that's good, but I need to give you a new set. Frank got up from Jess and got his kit. Carefully, he cut the bandages from her leg. The large gash across it was still prominent, although it had almost completely clotted. Frank wrapped the new set of bandages on tight. Once he was done, he looked back at Jess. Jess, what the hell happened out there? Jess recounted her experience to Frank the best way she could in her weak state, her voice quiet. Starting from her leaving the house all the way until Frank had found her, she spared no detail, not even about the beast she had seen. She had no doubt Frank would believe her. Her leg was all the proof he would need. Once she finished, Jess asked Frank a question of her own.
Frank, how did you know I was in danger? Why come find me?
It's simple. I could hear you. More specifically, your rifle. I know you're a good shot, and the only reason you would have to shoot that much is if you were in danger, especially after I heard you fire that. Frank pointed his thumb toward the dining room. Jess looked and saw her revolver laying on the table. So naturally I came to find you, and thank God I found you when I did. Jess smiled.
Yeah, I had a feeling you'd come.
Her smile then fell, a saddened frown taking hold. She turned her head away towards the fire.
I'm sorry, Frank.
Jess's voice had become quiet, subdued.
I could have gotten myself killed. I should have prepared more, been more careful. I shouldn't have messed with...
Frank quickly interrupted. Jess, stop. Jess's head quickly turned back toward Frank, his face far more serious than she had ever seen it. It's not your fault you got hurt. You couldn't have known what that thing was, and it's only natural for a hunter to chase an unknown trail. You think I wouldn't have done the same thing? Frank let out a small chuckle. Whenever you told me about the tracks, I was jealous I wouldn't be able to come with you. I just didn't tell you. I couldn't steal your excitement.
Well, I at least could have waited for you to feel better. I should have known it would be dangerous.
Jess stammered over her words. Frank quickly replied, Every hunt is dangerous, Jess. Like I said, you couldn't have known this would happen. Who in their right mind would expect to get attacked by some shape-shifting demon? Once again, if the roles were reversed, I would have gone after it too. Frank kept his smile at Jess. And if you're still worried about how you could have died, that doesn't matter. You didn't die, and you even managed to kill the thing. He kissed Jess on the forehead. You're strong, Jess. Don't ever forget that. Now, let me help you to bed. It's probably a lot more comfortable than the floor. Frank let down a hand. Jess took it and pulled herself up. Once again, Frank supported her and helped her walk to the bed. The next several weeks blurred themselves together in Jess's mind. She was unable to get up from the bed for the first two and had to rely on Frank to help her with everything. He brought her food, water, coffee, or anything else she needed. Luckily, with crutches, she just barely managed to get to the bathroom on her own. Every time she got up, she had to convince Frank that she could make it on her own so long as she had the crutches, much to Frank's chagrin. Jess knew Frank was only trying to help, but she never liked having to rely on other people, even her husband. Luckily, a few days after Jess was attacked, Frank had gotten better and was able to hunt. He only needed to once, as the buck Jess had killed provided them with more than enough food for a few weeks. It was only at the beginning of the third week that she was able to walk. They needed more food, and Jess, although she could walk with a limp, was in no shape to be hunting. Frank would have to go on his own. Jess began to grow concerned as she saw Frank loading his rifle and prepping his bag. Frank looked over at Jess on the couch. He could see her eyes were wider than normal. She was tensely looking out the window, shaking. He had to calm her down somehow. Jess, I'll be okay. After all, you killed it, right? Frank knelt next to Jess, laying his hand on her shoulder. The thoughts of such a recent event coursed through her mind, a never-ending barrage of images. Not only of what she had seen, but also of what could happen to Frank.
How do we know that for sure, Frank? What if it survived? What if there's more of them?
Jess looked at Frank, a look of concern painted across her face. Listen, we've been hunting in these woods for years, and neither of us have ever seen anything like that. There must have been only one of them, not only because we've never seen it with our eyes, but we've never seen anything like the trails you saw either, Frank said calmly, never moving his hand or breaking eye contact with Jess. These words put Jess to some ease. Frank was right. It most likely was only a single occurrence. Not only had Jess never seen something like that before, she'd also never heard of anyone telling a similar story. She had heard other legends of creatures, but nothing like what she had seen.
You have a point.
Jess paused for a second.
Yeah, you're right. That thing is gone.
Jess didn't know whether she believed what she said or was just trying to convince herself that Frank wasn't in danger.
Just be careful, hon. I'd hate it if something happened to you.
I will, Jess. I promise. Frank kissed her and got up, took his rifle and his bag, then walked out the door. She watched through the window as Frank moved out into the snow-laden woods, her fear somewhat relaxed, but still ever present. The only thing Jess could do was wait. It would be best if she found something to distract herself from her thoughts. Jess's eyes panned to the bookcase sitting in the living room, hoping for something to catch her eye. She got up and took a book. She wasn't looking for anything specific, just something captivating enough to kill the time. She went back to the couch and laid down. She began to read. Time quickly slipped away from Jess. She had become captivated with the stories told by the pages. Before she knew it, over an hour and a half had gone by. However, Jess was immediately pulled to reality by a loud thud on the back door. Her heart began to race. Her mind immediately went to the beast. Slowly, and as calmly as she could manage, she put down her book and got up from the couch. She went into the bedroom and got her rifle from the cabinet. Keeping her rifle towards the door, she moved to it. Her breathing was heavy and her heart pounding in her throat. She came to the door and opened it slowly. She screamed when she saw him. Frank's body lay in the snow just in front of the door, his head aimed at her, his eyes glazed over, their irises as white as snow. A large pool of blood beneath him, beginning to freeze. Jess dropped her rifle and fell to her knees, tears falling down her face. Frank had been disemboweled, a large gash displayed on his stomach, several large gashes laid along his arms and legs. Jess couldn't move. The only thing she could do was wail and hold Frank's corpse, her head aimed at the ground. She then saw two black legs move into her field of view. Slowly, she looked up and saw the beast standing there. Jess didn't have time to react. The beast grabbed her by her throat, pinning her to the ground. She tried her best to scream, in vain hope someone would hear her and help. However, nobody came. The beast raised its clawed hand, the fire in its eyes burning brighter than ever. Jess screamed as its arm tore through her chest. Jess woke with a scream. She looked around the room. She was still laying on the couch. The book that was once in her hand had now fallen on the floor next to her. The night terrors she had since she encountered the beast had still not gone away. Every night was the same. She'd be back in those woods, back with the beast. However, she'd never be able to escape it, and her death would always be near. However, this was the first one that involved Frank, making it far worse. Jess stayed on the couch for a second to calm down. She cupped her face in her hands and sighed. She then got up, limping to the kitchen. She needed coffee. She didn't want to fall asleep again. Seeing the beast was something she dreaded every night. Once her coffee was brewed, Jess knelt back down to the book that lay on the floor. She decided the dining room might be a better place to read. It would be harder to fall asleep in a chair. After another 2 hours had passed, Frank came back in the house.
Hey, managed to get anything?
Jess said excitedly. Frank returned Jess's joy. Yeah, I managed to get another book. Damn thing almost got away, though. Frank took his rifle off his shoulder, placing it next to the door. He did the same with his revolver, which laid in a holster in front of his waist. I'll go out and clean it in a bit. He turned his attention back to Jess. How's your leg doing?
How about I show you?
Jess got up from the chair and stumbled over to Frank. Jeez, I didn't know you day drank, Frank said, chuckling to himself.
Oh, shut up and come here,
Jess said, laughing along with Frank. They embraced, and she kissed him on the cheek. Then, without warning, the image of Frank's body flashed through Jess's mind. His glazed eyes burned into her head. She shuddered. Frank noticed. Hey, are you okay? Frank said with a hint of concern.
What? Yeah, I'm fine. Just been sitting down for a while. My leg still hurts, you know.
Jess had told Frank about the nightmares, but she didn't want to tell Frank about this one. She didn't want to retell it and have the scene play in her mind once again. The rest of the day went by normally. Frank skinned and cleaned his kill before serving it for dinner. Jess and Frank talked and played games just as they had been doing for the past few weeks. Then they went to bed. The next few months were the same. Once Jess's leg healed, the two hunted together, neither of them wanting the other to go alone, just in case the beast was still out there. Eventually, the bitter cold was washed away by the calm rains of spring, followed then by the harsh heat of summer. The memory of what had happened that day never left Jess's mind, but her fear of ever seeing the thing again did. If it wanted to find them, to kill them, it would have done so already. It was a warm summer's morning when Jess and Frank went out to hunt together. They had found tracks left in the loose soil and were tracking whatever left them. Eventually, they passed a clearing, the same one where Jess had first shot at the beast. She looked over it, the memories of that day playing through her mind. Frank noticed her gaze. Hey, you still with me, Jess?
What? Yeah, I was just thinking.
Jess looked back at Frank. trying her best to hide her thoughts. However, Frank knew her too well. "Don't worry about it, Jess. That thing is long gone," Frank said with a smile.
Yeah, I know.
Jess returned his smile.
But the worry is still there, as unreasonable as it is.
"I know. I ain't expecting you to forget about it. Just know we're safe." The two continued walking, following the trail, absent-mindedly talking about whatever they thought of. Then, Jess paused. She noticed something toward the edge of her vision. She looked harder, then quickly took her rifle off her shoulder and aimed it at the thing. Frank heard her gasp and her breath quicken and turned, readying his rifle as well. "Jess, what's up? You see the deer?"
No, Frank. It's back.
Jess centered her aim on a buck, twice as large as normal, its eyes afire.
It's back, Frank. That goddamn demon is back.
Jess's voice was calm, feeling safer with Frank and more confident in her abilities. Frank aimed his rifle at the thing too. "Damn it. Your call. What should we do?" Jess was silent. She wanted so badly to shoot at the thing, to kill it just as she had before. But she did it before, and it came back. Who said if she were to kill it again, that it wouldn't just come back after her again? "Jess, come on, talk to me." It wasn't moving, only staring. "Jess, you want me to shoot it or not?" Jess remembered that day, the pain she had endured, her leg that took over a month to heal fully, and the nightmares she endured for twice as long. Jess lowered her aim, but didn't break eye contact with the creature.
No. Lower your gun.
Frank looked at her in confusion. "Are you sure? What if it comes at us?"
It won't. If it wanted us dead, it would have attacked already. It wouldn't have let us see it. It's only watching us.
Jess paused and remembered what had antagonized the creature in the first place.
It only attacked me when I shot at it first. Before then, it was only following me.
"It could have been waiting for a good time to attack," Frank said, a mix of confusion and concern in his voice. "It could be doing the same right now."
That's a possibility, but not a likely one. Like I said, it wouldn't have let us see it.
Jess put her rifle back over her shoulder and signaled Frank to do the same.
Let's just keep going after our animal, and just keep an eye on that thing in the process.
The two watched as the fire in the creature's eyes was snuffed out. It then turned and walked away from them. Frank let out a relieved sigh. "Good call, Jess. If I were here alone, I definitely wouldn't have passed that shot up. Let's get going." The two managed to find the herd of deer that left the tracks, managing to score 2 kills, enough food for a month. It was around this time that Jess brought up the idea of starting a family. However, both agreed that teaching their kids in an environment that had such a dangerous and unpredictable creature was not a wise idea. Even if the creature seemed peaceful unless provoked, it was a risk that they were not willing to take. It was the end of summer that the arrangements were made. They packed their belongings and left their old home behind. They started their journey to a new point in their life, on the other side of the country, far from the horrors of the past. They were able to sell their old land and house, both of which were still in exceptionally good condition. The new plot of land lay no more than a few miles out of a small town, one with good schooling and safety, one perfect for a family that should no longer subsist off the land exclusively. Their new house was much larger than the old one, 2 stories and 3 bedrooms, perfect for their ideal family. Several years had passed since the day that left Jess with a new scar, one with a far more interesting story than the one left by the bear. Everyone she told it to always brushed it off as ghost stories, but that excuse could never explain the scar. Jess and Frank now had a steady family, 2 kids, their son Caden and their daughter Andrea, just as Jess had seen all those years ago. Her and Frank had jobs inside the town they called home, and were also able to make a good amount of money in hunting. Caden was now old enough to begin hunting himself, with help from his parents, of course. It was the night before they were supposed to bring him out to teach him the basics, hopefully getting him a kill. Frank had already gone to bed, and Jess was readying herself in the bathroom. She then walked out, seeing Frank already asleep. She smiled to herself. Her life was good, and she couldn't have been happier. She walked over to the window, looking down at the tree line that lay a few yards away. She then saw something in the darkness. At the edge of the woods stood a buck, twice as large as normal, dim embers burning in its eyes. It regarded her silently for a moment. then turned and walked away into the forest. Now, I know that kids can say some pretty crazy shit. For those of you that have kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Not the darndest thing crazy, as in the old show hosted by pre-rape Bill Cosby, where kids talk about boogers and poop. But crazy like, I guess we gotta find a good shrink kinda crazy. But in my case, I'm starting to think I need to find a good exorcist. We've been getting a fair amount of snow recently. As a kid, I had used to see snow as a white gold gift from God that got me out of school and gave me all kinds of fun things to do outside. As an adult, the second I see snowfall, I'll start cursing my existence. Oh, great. You mean I get to wake up at the ass crack of dawn, go outside and shovel my driveway for an hour, and I still have to drive to work and likely get in an accident? Oh, wow. Thanks, Jack Frost, you fucking dick. My daughter is in paradise, while I'm trying to figure out what sins I've committed in the past to warrant such punishment. Anyways, we had a decent snowfall not too long ago. Thank God it was on a Friday night. That meant I didn't have to go into work next day. Saturday morning, after my obligatory hour of hard labor shoveling, I decided to spend the day with my daughter in the snow. And now, a quick description of my daughter. She's literally the cutest 5-year-old ever. I know, most parents think that about their kids, but in this case, I'm right and you're wrong. She's she's permanently happy. And she has this crazy ability to cheer up whoever is around her. She's in perma-skip mode, to the point that I question whether she even knows how to walk properly. She's the most precious thing I've ever had in my life. So when she asked me if I would build her a snow fort, what was my answer? Your daddy's gonna build you a goddamn snow fort Knox. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would. The thing collapsed twice, which made me begin to second guess whether I was being a responsible parent or not. The idea of having Child Protective Services called because my snow fort didn't meet the proper building codes popped into my head. But on my third attempt, I began to recall memories of my youth and was able to build the most rugged snow fort ever built. It was almost like a giant igloo, but windows cut out so you could attack intruders with a barrage of snowballs. I climbed to the top and was able to jump up and down without any problems. That'll do, pig. My daughter was ecstatic when she saw it. Letting out a squeal and clapping her mittens together, we moved her tea table and chairs, along with her close posse of toys, into the fort to make it more like a snow home. She gave me a big hug and kiss and kept telling me how great it was, like I had gifted her a Ferrari. She played in that fort the entire day. I eventually went inside to veg on the couch, but my wife and I would periodically check on her. She had placed some of her lesser-liked toys outside of the fort to be the invading army. She was guarding against, and she was having a blast. The sun began to set when I called out to her to come for dinner. She immediately exited and skipped her way inside. We're having chicken nuggets and mac and cheese for dinner. That's one of the benefits of having children. You get to eat like a kid without being judged. I don't care how old you are, how much money you have. Chicken nuggets and mac and cheese are the fucking shit. I'd take them over a gourmet dinner 10 times out of 10. My daughter was excitedly telling us about her snow fort war stories. Mr. Potato Head was the enemy general, apparently, and he sounded like a real dick. He wanted to invade and take over her tea table. My wife and I nodded along with her story, occasionally chipping in a wow or oh really, to show how impressed we were with her valiancy. Oh, and he almost got in. He almost got my tea. I managed to keep him out, she told us proudly. She paused, and then added, the man with no head The man with no head said Mr. Potato Head wanted to kill us slow, but I told him Mr. Potato Head would never do that. Her voice trailed off at the last part. My wife and I nearly spit out our food. Who said that? My wife asked in disbelief. My daughter bowed her head, like kids do when they're embarrassed or ashamed. The man with no head, she answered timidly, barely above a whisper. My wife and I exchanged glances. Who told you about that nonsense? The kids at school? I asked. More firmly than I should have. My daughter bowed her head even more. Her lips began to tremble. It immediately broke my heart. Here, my precious 5-year-old was telling us how great of a day she'd had, and how she was about to break out into tears. I felt guilty for sounding harsh and moved my chair over to her, put my hand on her shoulder. Oh, no, it's okay, baby, it's okay. You're not in trouble. We're not mad, I said, much more gently than before. But who told you about the man with no head? Nobody did, Daddy, she said, sniffling. She wiped her nose with her arm. Okay, I replied, unsure of what to say. Well, who told you about such an awful thing? About killing people slowly? He did, Daddy, she stammered, on the verge of breaking down. My wife and I exchanged glances once more. Well, that's not real, sweetie, okay? My wife said, putting her hand on the other shoulder. Now finish up. We need to get you ready for bed. Once our daughter had done the nightly ritual of bathing, putting on pajamas, brushing her teeth, getting into bed, receiving a nightly story, and eventually passing out, my wife and I had a talk about what had just happened. We eventually decided that everything is fine. As I said before, kids say some pretty crazy shit. I guess such active imaginations must eventually spit out something dark every once in a while. A phase. Nothing to worry about. After the week, school was still closed, so my daughter was able to stay home, to her great enjoyment. My wife and I took turns staying home to watch her. Every day, she'd go out to her fort and play. She'd spend every minute she could out there, almost like she was possessed. Over time, however, I began to notice a change in her. She wasn't smiling as much. Her skip had turned into a sullen walk. She wasn't the happy girl I liked to brag about anymore. We'd ask her what was wrong, but she wouldn't answer. In fact, she stopped saying much of anything. Maybe it wasn't a nothing to worry about phase like we originally thought. We began talking about seeing if there was someone she could talk to, because she definitely wasn't talking to us. I was tucking her in one night, when she finally opened up. Daddy, can you make him go away? She asked, sounding miserable. Make who go away, honey? I asked gently, stroking her arm. Man with no head. I sighed. He's not real, sweetie, I assured her, hiding that I was slightly disturbed by the idea. She sniffled and looked away toward a window. He is, Daddy, she said, her voice quivering. He tells me such bad things. I don't like him. See? Right there. How can he talk if he has no head? I asked, trying to sound playful, but it didn't work. He says it here, she answered, pointing to her head. She looked at me pleadingly, like only I could release her from this torment. He says you don't love me, that you hate me and wish I was dead. I sat back, astonished. What? Oh, honey, that's so not true. You know that's not true, don't you? I asked. I put my hand behind her head on the pillow. Look, Amanda, you're the most amazing little girl that I know, and your mommy and I love you very much. There isn't anything in the world that we wouldn't do for you. You know that, right? She waited for a moment, then nodded. Good. You know what you should say to that meanie when he comes around again? She sniffled. What? You tell him he's a poop-faced liar, and your daddy's gonna beat him up if he comes back here, yeah? She started giggling, which is exactly the effect I was looking for. Referencing poop fixes 90% of problems with little kids. I love you, honey, I said, planting a kiss on her forehead. Good night. Good night, Daddy, she said, smiling and squeezing her teddy. That night, my wife and I decided we needed to find a child psychologist. The next day, lo and behold, it snowed again, and school was canceled again. It was my turn to stay home. My wife's an ER doctor, so getting time off is difficult for her. After breakfast, like clockwork, my daughter headed outside to the snow fort. I cleaned up and began getting ready to do some lovely shovel work. It wasn't long before my daughter ran back inside. She had tears streaming down her face and looked terrified. Hey, you didn't like that, Daddy? She sobbed. She held out a folded piece of paper in her shaking hand. He said to give this to you. Alarmed, I grabbed the paper and unfolded it. On it, written in jagged handwriting, I'll cut your fucking throat while your whore wife and daughter watch. I immediately called the police, who arrived in less than 10 minutes. They didn't find anything around the house or in the fort, but they told me they'd received multiple calls like this. They told me to keep my doors locked and to keep a phone on me at all times. I destroyed the snow fort not long after they left. For those of you living in the Boston area, keep your kids indoors. He comes when it snows. He first suspected that they were going to eat him when he noticed the distinct lack of Yuletide smells. It wasn't perhaps a conscious thought, at least not one which had been fully realized, but there was a clearly growing uneasiness within him. Somehow, he just knew. Surely, if a family invited you for Christmas dinner, the house would be filled with wonderful aromas associated with the annual feast. Succulent roast turkey, honey-glazed vegetables, perhaps the fumes of mulled wine or a brandy-covered Christmas pudding. But no, all of those were absent, yet the table was set. It was a particularly bleak Christmas, and while snow was often welcomed at the festival time of year, the penetrating cold and frost which seemed to sabotage both homes and their residents' bodies was not. The temperature had plummeted on the 7th, and there had been no sign of any forthcoming reprieve. Families attempted as best they could to reach one another, but for many it was to be a lonely Christmas day. Travel, especially for the elderly, was almost impossible for fear of slipping on the ice. One fall was all it would take for a broken hip or shoulder, and from the more fragile individuals amongst them, recovering from such an injury was not an easy task. Certainly not as easy as it would be for those of a younger vintage. The Cardinal family had taken pity on an elderly gentleman who had recently moved into the neighborhood only a few streets away. They were of an upstanding stock and took part in a local home help initiative, spending time with the old and vulnerable. Everyone knew and loved them. Timmy was the youngest, a boy of only 5 or 6. He was a child who all looked upon with great adoration, never complaining, never causing trouble, always adorable, and his 10-year-old sister, Camilla, was equally as admired. They were both a testament to the caring and nurturing parenting skills of Ben and Lucy Cardinal. Each year, as the cold winter drew in, the Cardinal family were admired for their dedication and commitment to those around them. Their passion, almost zeal, for helping those who were less fortunate, but behind the smiles and the skin-deep facade of that of a loving family, lurked a far more sinister purpose. They had a tradition each year, a way to reward themselves for their kindness and generosity, one which stemmed back through many previous generations of the Cardinal family. Each Christmas, they would invite a guest for dinner who would be welcomed with open arms into their home, sat down at a beautifully set table, provided with humorous and enjoyable Christmas conversation, and then, by the light of the roaring fire, the guest would be stabbed to death and eaten gratefully. They all reveled in this old tradition, with Tommy looking forward to it the most. He had a voracious appetite and a waistline to match it, but children do get wrapped up in the anticipation of a family Christmas, and his parents were delighted to see a growing boy fill his belly. Camilla was of a more quiet disposition than her stout little brother, slight of figure with a pallid complexion which reminded all of her mother, but make no mistake, she adored eating with the family and could render anyone silent with a sharp, cold insult. Ben was the local police chief for the area. so covering up their annual feast was quite the cinch. While Lucy was, shall we say, a relation of sorts, and was entirely enthusiastic about maintaining the Christmas tradition. Their guests were invariably those without family, and often of a ripe old age, forgotten by society, left to wither in their isolated little homes. Ben explained to the children yearly that it was almost a kindness to put the victims out of their slowly increasing misery. And besides, when they did eventually die, they would be shoved into a box in the ground or roasted into ashes. What a waste of good meat. This year, Timmy and Camilla were especially excited. It was all their mother could do to calm their nerves, but on that Christmas Eve it was nearly impossible, for they knew the special treat they were in for the following day. The Cardinals were hosting a most special guest. His name was Sergio Maru. He had hailed from the Eastern Islands. They'd never had foreign meat before, and the very idea of tearing into some delicious exotic muscle and fat made this year's feast something to really look forward to. They had met the old man, Maru, when Ben had noticed the unusual name in his home help list. Each year as Christmas approached, the volunteers at the local church would be given names and addresses of pensioners in the area who had no family and would be left quite alone over the holiday season. At that festive time of year, and worried that many of the frailer residents might succumb to the biting cold, church committee members would visit each of these lonely individuals and offer a friendly ear, a helping hand, and often some hearty food to the poorest of those on the list. The names rarely changed, but at least one person on that list would sadly pass away that year. Being an upstanding member of the community and a high-ranking police officer in the area, Ben would often inform the church that one of their flock had sadly passed away, and with no friends or known family, he would concoct a lie which usually involved a long-lost son or daughter appearing to take their sadly departed relative somewhere far to be buried. That, or he would say that they had simply moved, having a bit of a deal with the local estate agent and the solicitor's firm to throw the proceeds from any property sales their way. The family were not without influence. It was incredible how little people questioned this, but as the Cardinals ensured that each Christmas meal was not an active member of the church or community, people just assumed that Ben knew best. This year, the Cardinals had been hoping to invite Lucy Rindridge around for her Christmas swan song, but unfortunately she had died during the summer. Ben had investigated, and he suspected that an intruder had been inside the house with her at her time of death, but it seemed as though the causes were natural. No, the family would just have to have someone different for dinner. Then the name appeared on the list. Sergio Maru, 86, slight emphysema, no family, knows no one in the area, and has only recently moved here. Perfect. Ben found Mr. Maru to be an absolute delight. While he was obviously very frail, his mind was still sharp, and he regaled Ben with numerous colorful stories about the old country and the adventures he had been on while in the full bloom of youth. Of particular interest were his war stories, and Ben was thrilled to know that their main course would be that of an intelligent, well-traveled man. He even looked unlike any of the previous victims. He was quite tall, although slightly hunched with age, and with a long, crooked nose, an intense stare. Ben fancied that in his youth, Maru would have been quite intimidating. His kind smile and obvious fragile frame, however, left Ben in no doubt that the kids would love him. They enjoyed eating those with character and a gentle disposition. He always enjoyed the meat more if it had a keen mind and was out of the ordinary. As the family religion, one which managed to stay unseen yet influential throughout the centuries, stated that the eating of another human being would transmit some of its strengths to those whom devoured it. As with many of those who can only look into the past rather than into the future, Sergio Maru enjoyed the company greatly and was touched when Ben invited him to sit at his family's Christmas table. The old man was extremely frail and required the assistance of both Ben and Camilla to help him in and out of Ben's car and then into the house. His emphysema was particularly bad that day, as each step was accompanied by the wheezing, fluid-filled sounds of struggling lungs. Each room of the Cardinal home was draped in a multicolored sectional of rather crass Christmas decorations, with numerous cards adorning every visible table and mantelpiece, showcasing just how popular Ben and his family really were. The table was beautifully laid with red cotton cloth, resting underneath an elegant cream dining set. The old man found that the rest of Ben's family were just as pleasant and congenial as he was. Timmy and Camilla were kind and very well behaved for their age, helping the frail old man to his chair carefully, then waiting on him, topping off his drink as their mother and father busied themselves in the kitchen. Finally, Lucy appeared carrying a huge centerpiece plate. It was unusually large as she sat it in the middle of the table, empty and devoid of food. The old man Maru caught a look on Lucy's face. It was brief, and he immediately attempted to disregard it as a product of his imagination, but it unsettled him deeply. It was as if a private joke had been passed between the eyes of Lucy and her children, a flicker of a grin, not one of kindness or of Christmas spirit, but rather one resembling that of a conspiratorial bully, as if Sargio was the unwitting recipient of some unwholesome prank, waiting to be ridiculed. Just as the unease began to diminish, Ben appeared with a large, jagged carving knife and a long, two-pronged fork, which reminded Sergio most of a butcher's implement that would be required to cut a decent-sized turkey, a turkey which became increasingly conspicuous by its absence. There they sat for over an hour, each member of the Cardinal family replenishing the old man's drink with enthusiasm and showing concern for every and each cough or moment of uncomfortable breathing experienced by their guest. But it was a strange concern. There they sat gleefully, asking Mario questions and then listening to the stories and answers which came about his life, where he had lived, how many battles he had fought in. But the interest and concern seemed to be distant somehow. It was only skin deep. Each time their guests mentioned the old country, those same conspiracy-laden glances were traded across the table, as if excited, not by the content of the story, but rather the simple fact that Maru was a foreigner. The absence of not only the food, but that of the mere mention of it was unsettling enough. But what was more perplexing was that Ben repeatedly stole looks toward an antique clock which sat on the mantelpiece above the fire, looks which were poorly hidden and betrayed their purpose. He was counting down the minutes to some event, while the old man had no idea of what the event was. The certainty was apparent that it was not connected to anything cooking in the kitchen. Maru knew that there was simply no food being roasted, grilled, or even cooled on the window ledge nearby. Whatever was being planned, it was not going to involve him eating a Christmas meal. It was Camilla who stopped smiling first at his anecdotes and historical observations. She ceased listening. No longer was she politely laughing at the obvious jokes and enduring the sight of an old man repeating himself through forgetfulness. Camilla was simply staring with those pinpoint cold dark eyes as a snake before a strike. Timmy was next to abandon the act as he began to grin menacingly at Sergio, as his hands gripped a small serrated steak knife intensely. The most alarming thing was the focus of Timmy's stare was not on the old man's face, but his wrinkled neck. With one last glance at the clock, Ben ceased being the jovial, attentive host and began to run his fingers along the huge carving knife in front of him, with an odd mixture of anger and lust upon his face. Sergio had seen many things in his time, but nothing as surprisingly strange and unnerving as this. Finally, when the clock began to chime, Lucy relinquished her false, enduring shell and exposed the cold-hearted and twisted personality which lay beneath. As the chimes slowly rang throughout the house, one by one echoing and lonely and piercing in their symbolism, each of the cardinals rose up from their chairs, sharp, jagged knives in hand, and waited. The chime rang once, and they uttered an indecipherable phrase in unison. The chime rang twice, and they increased their cult-like chorus in ferocity and volume. The chime rang 3 times, and they stopped. They were all silent, the house devoid of sound, Christmas spirit, and that of hope. The old man's wheezing grew in intensity as the uniquely bizarre sight of the twisted family about to dine dawned upon Sargio. The family then quietly and efficiently walked around the dining table and stood motionless surrounding their guest. Just as the old man was about to inquire what was to become of him, the clock on the mantelpiece burst to life one final time. The chime was different from the others. It was sharper, somehow fouler, and echoed once and once only throughout the cardinal home. From behind, Lucy slit the old man's throat ear to ear, and Ben thrust the carving knife deep in Sargu's stomach. Both parents then removed their knives and stood back, watching with pride as Camilla cut and stabbed repeatedly, while Timmy thrust his steak knife in and out of Marwa's legs, neck, and arms. After a few minutes, the frenzy diminished as both children grew tired, and with one final downward thrust, Timmy drove his steak knife so deep into the old man's hand that it skewered it completely, embedding itself into the table on which the hand rested. The children now ran to their parents' collective embrace. They hugged and rejoiced in what was a fantastic Christmas game, and now could look forward with delight to some succulent exotic meat. Arms wrapped around one another, they stared at their victim and began to laugh loudly, commenting on the old fool stories of times gone by, the war, the old country. And as they turned to each other once more, the laughter diminished, and they all looked into each other's rosy, blood-covered faces and shared a family moment. This had been one of Ben's favorite sacrifices. But the laughter had not completely ceased. One person was still laughing loudly. Confusion turned to abject horror as the bizarre truth revealed itself. It was Mr. Maru. Sitting covered in blood, his head tilted back and the deep cuts in his throat wide open, the dinner guest laughed loud and strong, a laugh which was both young and old. His head arched forward as he pulled Timmy's steak knife out of his hand, dropping it on the floor. Camilla screamed as Lucy hid behind Ben. What they had thought to be a corpse now stared at them all, as they had stared at it with a singular purpose. Timmy began to pee himself and cry as two previously retracted fangs cracked through the old man's upper gum, revealing a serrated and terrifying grin. As he rose to his feet, Lucy fainted, and with both hunch and age now gone, the cardinal's guest loomed tall and dark before them, his eyes piercing, telling tales of countries and decades and centuries of existence. Sergio Maru ate well that Christmas. I was born and raised in a missionary orphanage. My mother had come there in tattered condition, given birth to me, and died. Life was miserable at the orphanage, especially around the holidays. Nobody in the orphanage liked Christmas. But Father James made us follow the Christmas tradition. When I was 8 years old, I got adopted by this nice English couple. My new mom and dad were nice. They didn't have their own children, so they smothered me with a lot of love. Things were going great, but then the holidays came. I asked Dad if they celebrated Christmas in the house, and he said yes. My heart sank, but I loved them so I decided I would happily celebrate Christmas with them. On Christmas Eve, when my mom and Dad were returning to their room after a long session of carols, I followed them. When they were kissing goodnight, they saw me. A smile appeared on my mom's face, but it turned into a look of horror as I started to strip my clothes down. Mom and Dad came running and covered me with the blanket seconds before I got totally naked and asked me what I was doing. I said it was Christmas. Are we not supposed to celebrate Christmas? My dad, who had turned pale, said, "This is not how we celebrate Christmas, sweetie." Right now, I know my daughter hates me. I told her that Santa isn't real, that we'll not celebrate Christmas in our house. No presents, no stockings, no decorated tree. Of course, she didn't like that. She screamed at me that I'm the reason her classmates reject her. They laugh at her for her unusual shortness, her lack of a father, and now this. All thanks to her backwards, reclusive mother. My daughter asks me why I can't be like all the other mothers at her school. She went to her room crying and is still there now. I had no answer for her. I know that no matter how hard I try, I never will. She's still too young for me to explain the agony of slaving away my entire childhood in a constantly churning factory. The horror of seeing my parents sliced to death before my eyes for making too many mistakes. The knowledge that a being who can see into your mind, into your soul, could be lurking in every shadow, and if he heard disloyal thoughts, he would not hesitate to murder you then and there. There are 10 of us who tried to run away that year, on the night that he would not be there to stop us. Would have never have dared to join them if I had not learned that I was pregnant. I couldn't allow myself to bring a child into such a world. But our journey across the ice water was too long and too slow, and he found us before we reached safety. The 5 who had not yet made it to shore in their boat were devoured immediately. The rest of us could only run and not look back. He caught up to us. Of course he did. I have not told my daughter how her father died. In truth, I don't know, for he used the last of his strength and his magic to send me far away. Even so, my nightmares give me ample visions of what could have occurred. Among the humans, there is safety in numbers. Here I can hide and try to forget. But, at least, until the winter season reminds me again. Santa Claus is not real. That is not truly a lie. The happy, loving, fatherly man that my daughter believes in never existed. The monster that roams the world on Yuletide cares nothing for children's smiles. He only brings them toys so that they will worship him, so that he can gorge on their belief and grow even stronger. I don't believe he comprehends mercy or love. I have no illusions of what will happen to my daughter if we are discovered. No matter the cost, I won't let that happen. She'll never have to suffer as I did. My daughter hates me, but I don't mind. Better, far better, than the risk of what could be. As Christmas is just around the corner, I remembered something that happened on the day of Christmas 7 years ago. Well, it started a couple of days before Christmas, but on the day of the most popular holiday, I discovered that a single household can hold the worst and best types of people. Before I confuse any of you even further, let me explain why I had to quit my job on the happiest day of the year. For those of you that either work at any of the Walmarts or Targets, you know that the giant green bins where customers can donate toys for underprivileged children are a complete scam. For those of you that don't know, on the day before Christmas, my manager would get our warehouse workers to bring both of the bins back and we would restock those toys. Most managers in the other stores would do the same thing. It would help them hit quota, and because of that, would get them a bigger check. It's fucked up, I know, but I couldn't really do anything about it. I had a family to take care of, and though this job was far from glamorous, I still managed to pay for everything we needed. I don't remember everything that happened, but I feel like it would be easier for me if I divided it by days. December 20th, 2010. I was walking around the store, trying to act busy, when I saw a little boy walking around the store alone. He was wearing a white shirt and a pair of jeans. Both articles of clothing were filled with holes and stains. He didn't have any shoes or socks on. Concerned, I started to walk up to him and see if he was lost. But before I got to him, he turned the other way and started running towards the exit. As he was leaving the store, he grabbed a couple of toys out of the donation bins and ran out the exit. It took me a couple of seconds to figure out what the hell happened, and I ran up to the doors. He was long gone. December 21st. I saw the same kid around 2 in the afternoon. He was walking around the store wearing the same clothes. Without hesitation, I waved my hand towards him and asked, "Do you need anything? You know, it's not nice to steal. If you just tell me what you want, I'll be happy to get you something." He turned towards me, and it took everything out of me not to let out a gasp. On the front of his shirt, there was a 5-inch long hole, and blood was slowly pouring out of the hole. I tried running up towards him to help him, but he shook his head slowly before running out of the store just like the day before. Blood was dropping on the floor around him. He grabbed a couple more toys out of the bin before running out of the store. I was close behind him. By the time I ran through the door, I couldn't see him anymore, which was enough to raise some flags. The parking lot was huge and surrounded our store. There was no way he could have been that fast. I tried looking at the front of the store, thinking he was hiding, but after 30 minutes of trying to find him, I gave up. When I walked back into the store, I tried to find the little drops of blood on the floor, but they were gone. I asked a couple of the other workers, but they told me that they didn't see any blood. December 22nd. I didn't want to do it, but I didn't have any other choice. I was concerned about the kid. And after a night of thinking about what I should do, I decided to tell loss prevention about it. I told them right as I came in at 10 in the morning. By 4 in the afternoon, I was asked to come review the tapes with them. When I walked into the office, I saw that one of the LPs and the general manager was in the room watching the tapes. The manager motioned me over to the seat next to him and asked, "Around what time did you see the kid?" I told him it was around 2. As soon as I told him, he let out a sigh and asked, "All right, Jared, answer me truthfully. Have you been doing any types of drugs? Just be honest. You've been working here for a while. I won't fire you. You'll still be in line for the assistant manager position." Thrown off, I let out a scoff and asked him what he was talking about. Without saying a word, the manager took the tape back to 2 p.m. And I watched in horror as I started running around the store like a madman. The kid wasn't on the tape. He turned around and faced me before asking, "So, are you sure you didn't do any drugs? You're a good worker. I would hate having to fire you for lying." Not trying to make it any worse, I told him that I was just exhausted from the holiday schedule and I'd even take a drug test if it was necessary. He stared at me for a couple of seconds before telling me to take a couple of days off and rest. December 24th. The past 2 days were spent with my family. It's amazing how fast your kids grow. He's 3 now, and honestly, the last time I was able to spend time with him was about 6 months ago. It's sad when I see my son being so much more attached to my wife, but soon, I'll get the promotion. I'll be able to use my vacation days without having to worry about getting in trouble. We played with a couple of his toys, and I repeatedly promised him a couple of new toys that he had his eyes on. Before I went to work that day, he told me he loves me. He told me he wants me to stay home more. It took everything out of me not to cry. My wife gave me a kiss and told me to try to come home as soon as possible since I'm working on Christmas. I told her I would try, but even she knew that I'd be working late. My shift began at 11, so I came in 15 minutes early. As soon as I clocked in, a coworker of mine walked up to me and asked if I knew what was going on. When he saw the confusion on my face, he coughed and said, "Mike," the manager, "has been asking all of us if we've been stealing out of the donation bin. Apparently a couple of shit has gone missing. They're pretty sure an employee has done it since they can't find anyone stealing on the cameras." Mike asked me if I knew about anyone stealing from our store about 3 or 4 hours later. I told him I didn't hear anything. Shaking his head, he turned around and started to walk away. That's when I saw him again. He was wearing the same beat-up clothing, but the huge hole in the shirt was gone. In his shaking right hand was a knife. I tried to call out to Mike, but I couldn't. I watched helplessly as the boy ran up in front of Mike. He didn't even notice the boy was standing just 3 feet in front of him. The only thing that caught his attention was when the child said, "Quit stealing from the kids." Mike stopped dead in his tracks and looked around. The boy then ran up to him and planted a knife in his chest and ran out of the store. Mike fell to the floor, clutching his chest. After a couple of seconds, his hand fell to his side, and he was completely still. There wasn't a cut on his body. The paramedics arrived shortly after. We learned later that day that Mike had died of a heart attack. Everyone at our store was shocked. Mike always made sure that he led the healthiest lifestyle possible. Good news, I was able to get home early that day. Bad news, at 3 in the morning I received a phone call from the assistant manager. He asked me if it would be possible for me to come to work at 7. I told her I would and fell back asleep. My wife was pissed I wouldn't be there while my excited son opened his presents. A couple of cops were at the store when I got there. One of them walked up to me and asked if I had a moment to talk to him. I don't remember what the exact words were, but I'll try my best. Has Mike been acting strangely for the last few days? No, not really. I mean, he's been pretty mad about someone stealing from the donation bins, but besides that, no. Have you ever met his child or wife? No. To be honest, I didn't even know he had a family. Can you just take a look at the photo? Tell me if you happen to see the son. One of your coworkers told us that you've been acting kind of strange for the last couple of days, claiming to see a young boy in the store. He took a photo out of his jacket and showed me. I tried my hardest to maintain my composure when I looked at the photo. It was the boy that I saw in the store. He was even wearing the same clothes. That was the last photo taken of his son. His son was found in Mike's bedroom with a knife wound on his stomach. Looks like the son had died of blood loss. The wife was found in the living room with a knife in her head. The only person alive was his 2-year-old daughter. She was in the basement, surrounded by what seems like completely new toys. What's odd is that the neighbors told us they didn't see Mike come home. Several people at the bar he frequented told us that he was pretty much there every night for the past couple of days, but the baby wasn't malnourished in any way. There was even a bottle of juice sitting next to her when we found her. I didn't want to seem crazy. I didn't want to get tied into something I knew nothing about. Instead of telling the truth, I told them I never saw the boy in the picture. The officer looked at me with a puzzled look on his face before giving me a nod and thanking me for my time. I took the day off after that and quit the next day. I never did figure out why Mike killed his wife and son. And honestly, I don't want to know. The only thing I know is that the little brother was lucky to have an older brother take care of her, even after he died. Like I said, it's been 7 years since that happened. I now work 40 hours a week as a manager at the local electronics store. I'm not rich by any means, but that memory has left a huge impact in my life. Every year, I'll put aside some money to buy an extra gift for Christmas, and I'll donate it to those local charities. This year, I found an amazing subreddit called Santa's Little Helpers. They have a lot of families that are struggling to give any sort of Christmas to their children. And honestly, it doesn't take a lot to make a struggling family's year a little special. In retrospect, we were extremely foolish. But in retrospect, they were so charming and lifelike, the Santas. Every household containing enthusiastic children contained a Santa, a humanoid thing bringing all desires to reality. The parents of each respective household were relieved to be free of the burden of Christmas shopping. Soon after discovering the household Santa would acquire anything instructed to, no one questioned how these objects were acquired. They had deep, rich voices that appealed to the infants, toddlers, teens, and teenagers alike. Smaller children would sit on their laps and ask things of them, many childish things that lacked further thought. Of course, each one listened deeply. The parents thought this was to be absolutely enduring, and snapped pictures. People regarded them as family members, and throughout every family holiday card that year, the Santa could be seen, grinning with emptiness. No one questioned why they'd suddenly become family. When communicating to outside relatives about the magnificent miracles, it was mentioned very consistently that no other town, city, or settlement aside from ours had received Santas. We laughed it off, arrogantly thinking we were special in some way, and ignoring the warnings from our concerned loved ones. Relatives opted to not even visit that year. Not a single individual aggressed or intruded. Us, too happy around these artificial holiday constructs. Them, too wary of the omnipresent Santa. Even so, not one of us questioned where they'd come from. The snow that year was hellish, and our communication methods were mostly cut off. Despite this, the Santas supervised and helped eager children in their creation of snowmen and snow angels, and intermittently participated in the ever-appreciated snowball warfare. It was then that they turned on us, is something I'd like to say. But whatever mechanics drove them didn't wear out, malfunction, or break. Not even their assaults with snowballs damaged them. They were a part of our families now, and so they stayed. After Christmas, they lingered. After New Year's, they remained. Even after Chinese New Year, they hadn't left. The snow picked up and we were isolated, stuck with them. Yet no one found this disconcerting. I'm one of the few, if not the only person that is unnerved by this. I'm single, no kids, and so I didn't receive one. I observed all of this foolishness with no way to prevent it. I fear that one day they will turn on us. They were sent for a reason. Contact with the outside world lessens. This was the only method I had left to convey this to anyone who would listen. And I'm suspicious that a future will arrive where they'll kill us all, like shooting fish in a barrel. The unknown creator, whoever they are, wherever they are, must be biding their time until their creations blend wholly into the woodwork, become a regular part of their routine until we forget why we ever wondered about them at all. They're waiting until we get too comfortable with our bearded buddies. Mommy, what are you doing? I'm brining the turkey. What's brining? I soaked the turkey in the salt water and... Why? Hey, I said, tightening the string on my apron. Why don't you go play with the Starman toy I got you? I don't want to play with it anymore. Kids these days lose interest in the new toy in an hour. Want to watch Mommy take out the Christmas cookies? I pulled the tray out of the oven. Heat nipped at my fingers. The cookie Jackson made was burned at the edges and terribly misshapen. Your cookie turned out great, see? Can I eat it now? He asked, his grimy little hand shooting for it. I thought it was for Santa. It was, but I'm hungry. And if everyone else is feeding Santa cookies, he doesn't really need mine, right? Smart kid. I led him into the dining room with the cookies and a tall glass of milk. There you go, honey. He sat down. I glanced out the window. Christmas lights from the house across the street twinkled back in the falling dusk. I patted him on the shoulder and began walking away. Mommy! What now? Yes, Jackson. I hear jingling. I hear jingling of Santa's reindeer. That's nice, I said. Probably just the old man next door walking his corgi, but whatever. I'm not going to rain on his parade. I'm going to go listen to the reindeer. Thank God. Finally, something to keep him busy. I returned to the kitchen and frowned at the turkey. It looked so pale and slimy. My mother would be here tomorrow, and she was so particular about it. Don't overcook it. It'll be too dry. Oh, don't put too much salt. Nobody likes a salty turkey. Oh, and don't burn it. Oh my goodness, don't burn it. Her voice echoed in my head. Dave made such a perfect, wonderful turkey last year. The way he seasoned it, it was exquisite. Yeah, well, then I caught Dave seasoning someone else's turkey, so to speak. Mommy, I hear them, he shouted. That's great, I called back. Dave's attempts to reconcile were, to say the least, lacking. Sometimes he'd leave a voicemail just saying, I love you, then hanging up. Other times he'd text me a photo of his hand wearing the wedding ring. No caption, nothing else in the picture, just his hand. And the ring was so stupid looking anyway. The silver encrusted with a ton of tiny garnets because red is the color of love. Red is also the color I saw when I found him Mommy, I hear them. The jingling, the footsteps. That's great, honey. Listen. I sighed and rinsed the slime off my hands. Okay, Jackson, I'm coming, I said, stepping into the dining room. I listened. I froze. My heart began to pound. Santa's here, see? He squealed. It wasn't the jingling of bells or a leash. It was the jingling of keys as someone tried the lock. I grabbed Jackson's arm and dragged him out of the dining room. Mommy, what are you doing? We're going to sit here and wait for Santa to come down the chimney, see? I said, my voice quivering. I eyed the back door. Could we make a run for it? He's on the roof! Jackson squealed, grinning. I hugged Jackson, holding him as close as I could. I screamed. Jackson broke free of my arm and ran towards the chimney. Then I saw it. A small box, wrapped in black paper, had fallen through the fireplace. Jackson, no! It was too late. He picked it up, grinning. Then he frowned. No, it's not mine. He shoved it into my lap. It's for you, Mommy. Hand shaking, I picked it up. The note read, You changed the locks. My heart pounding. I lifted the lid. A ring, encrusted with 1,000 tiny garnets.
Do you think we're dead?
I gave Eleanor a perplexed look. I can see your breath, and we're talking right now, so...
No.
She muttered, shivering in the keening wind.
Not here. No sense in asking that here. I mean, out there.
I stared out past the dark sea, reaching to the horizon and likely further still than I could ever conceive of. They say hell is hot. As I sit on the ramshackle heights we fight every day to maintain, the cold clawing at my skin, I truly wish it was. My mother used to say, as long as you tried. Those 5 words hammered strength into my psyche. They once gave meaning in battling hardships and misery. Now, that's a dangerous epithet. You're free to try if so inclined. Just know that none of us will even try to save you when your belly is sliced open and your guts slurped by the creatures that dog this place. We've had our fill of brazen souls out here. They serve to be torn apart in our place. I suppose it's something to be grateful for. The braver you are, the quicker you'll learn. Bravery is as insubstantial as death in this place. I should backtrack. I'm an extremophile. Always have been. Ever since the first time that adrenaline rush flooded my veins, I was hooked. Water sports, base jumping, spelunking, anything you can name is likely under my belt. The one activity I found myself coming back to was mountaineering. Ever since my dad took me up to Mount Snowdon, there's been an inscrutable urge to summit something higher, something steeper and harsher. This leads me to my most recent trip, summiting Monte Rosa's tallest peak, the Duferspitze. My climbing partner and good friend Rob climbed it in 2018. He shared plans of a second summit, so I took him up on the offer. I say climbing partner, but with my skill level, I really mean guide. Rob's expertise blew mine out of the water. Nothing much of interest happened on the drive. Long, boring, standard overall. When we arrived, the parking lot serving as our starting point was empty and quiet. Dead still. There was an air of unease lingering around us. Around me, at least. If Rob felt it, he didn't show it. But it was there, and I should have taken it as a warning. That's retrospection for you. Looking up at Monte Rosa made everything seem so insignificant. Its monster of a rock face stood mighty and gazed out across the landscape. Ants beholden to a molehill and its dominance. God help any who climbs it. Instead, we planned around the Marinelli Couloir, a steep and snow-laden gully. We triple-checked our mandatory gear. Ice picks, crampons, ropes, etc. All present. Clear and cold mornings were forecast for the ensuing week. Perfect climbing conditions. Rob's meticulous planning was impressive, to say the least. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little envious. The mountain hut alone was a 4-hour climb. Though the terrain was forgiving, hard-packed snow crackled below my crampons. A reassuring sound. Inside was cozy. The walls were insulated well, and the wood stove was stocked with more than enough firewood. Yet, even as the fire roared, a chill crawled up my back. Just like the parking lot, we were alone, and the nagging intuition in the back of my mind said that may not be coincidental.
Sure you're ready for tomorrow, mate?
Rob said, glancing over at me from the counter. Why, I mean, yeah, yep. I'm with good hands, coming with you.
Look, once we get up into the couloir, we ain't turning back, so there's no shame in having second thoughts.
No, it's not that. I mean, yeah, I could come back another time, but who knows how long I'd have to wait. Life's hectic, you know? Might be years till I can try again.
Just making sure. Nerves are a dangerous beast up there. As long as you listen to me, you'll be fine. But remember, don't panic. If you're feeling anxious, remind yourself that getting upset won't help your situation.
Heat from the waning coal coddled my body. Only embers flickered by the time I began to nod off into a deep, dreamless sleep. We set off at 8 a.m. after having oatmeal and berries. The first few hours ended up being a tough trek along the snowfield skirting round toward the couloir. Azure sky gazed down through the wispy high cirrus. We were about a mile from the gully when light snowfall started up. It wasn't hugely surprising, being on a mountain and all, but the sky remained clear. If anything, it had grown clearer over the past hour, and still the snow fell regardless. It was such a bizarre sight, I worried I might be getting altitude sickness. As icy pinpricks pelted my skin, the reality of the situation dawned on me. Visibility was dropping by the minute, and within 10, I could scarcely see Rob 20 feet ahead. And then he was gone. I don't mean his silhouette bled away into the whiteout. I mean even his footprints were entirely covered over. I called out to him in a panic, cupping my hands together in a futile attempt to pierce the howling gale. Hoping to catch sight of Rob, I plodded forward another 100 yards or so. Nothing. My next actions I still ruminate over today, forcing me to curse my own cowardice. Even if I was the one who disappeared, I didn't know that at the time. Without Rob to guide me, I thought I was surely going to die. So I turned back. Following the compass, I made a steady descent, hoping to get back to the hut faster than we'd come up. The fresh dusting of snow made frantic steps a danger, and I slipped several times. After an hour, my view was unchanged, pure whiteness. In my retreat, I'd somehow failed to notice a crucial detail. I wasn't going downhill. It seemed like I was in a flat snowfield, but when I turned a full 360 to get my bearings, I understood I was actually facing a gentle incline. A fresh wave of terror crashed down in my mind. I glanced down at my compass, and to my horror, saw the needle replaced by a listless spinning blur. I tried my best. Mom would have been proud, but the cold wore me down, the snow merciless as it pelted me. My footsteps grew closer and closer together until there were no footsteps at all. I crouched on one knee. I wasn't shivering anymore. Well, I did feel pretty warm, hot actually. I went to unzip my coat when a stark patch of lime caught my attention. An abandoned tent, long left to endure the elements. It looked old. My dulling mind didn't catch the oddity that it wasn't already buried by the snow. Our tent was in Rob's pack, and with him out of the picture, this was my only chance at survival. There were a few small tears in the canvas, but the tent sufficed in its primary purpose. Still, I had no means of warming myself up. Bundled tight in my sleeping bag, I felt the weight of exhaustion settle, and no sooner did my eyelids droop and my eyes rolled back. The fact I awoke at all filled me with a sense of relief. Brain still groggy, I sat up and observed the tent's interior. It fared well in the figurative flashbang of a snowstorm. Something was different. The small tears only looked out onto white, but all was quiet. Never has there been a silent blizzard. Only when a cold shock hit my foot did I notice the mounds of melting slush on the floor directly beneath each rip in the tent. I was snowed in. Adrenaline flooded my veins and sent my thoughts into hyperspeed. How long had I been buried? How much oxygen was left in the tent? How deep was I? Don't panic. Freaking out won't help. I took in a deep, controlled breath and crawled over to the zipper, hesitating before tugging it open in one swift motion. White fluff poured into the tent, and in a transitory state between dread and understanding, I scrambled backwards in fear of an icy casket. My mind cleared. Logically, if the snow was that powdery, I couldn't be down very deep. Still, the tent sagged, its backbone long since snapped. I dragged myself out and pushed my way through the dampening snow, lugging the pack with all my equipment behind. With the gap collapsing in on itself behind me, I planted my boots in the snow and stood. I wasn't on Monte Rosa. I wasn't in the Alps. I wasn't even on a mountain at all. Standing near the bottom of a sort of half-cone slope, the horizon-wide expanse of dark water was the first hint I was somewhere else entirely. I could tell the ocean was a ways down, but only after shuffling down to the edge did I catch a glimpse of the precipice. A rugged ice face plummeting some 400 feet. Vertigo struck suddenly, knocking me onto my ass, hands splayed like a starfish. Something sticking up near the edge caught my eye. It resembled the curve rails of a pool ladder. If said ladder was poorly made and rickety, with coarse gray rope tied to each side, graying fibers sequestered by an equally ashen backdrop. A tiny ray of hope beamed somewhere deep down inside of me. Maybe someone was here. I crawled through the powder and gripped the steel bars. My gloves did nothing against the inexorable chill of wind-beaten metal. Still, desperate curiosity willed my head and shoulders to lean over the precipice. Fixed into the mottled ice, a vertical tower of crude materials swayed in the ever-present winds. It reminded me of a shantytown with its hastily flattened planks and battered metal sheeting. For the life of me, I couldn't fathom what reason any sane person would have to build such a thing. Then again, I'd yet to find anything in this place I could fathom. "Hello?" I called out. The first words out of my mouth since waking up were hoarse and weak, tumbling pathetically down the mismatched scaffolding. There was an immediate response from somewhere below. I couldn't see anyone, but there were multiple voices, bleeding together into a garbled slur. Relief warped into regret as I remained hunched, frozen, as if I were some frost-caked gargoyle in a forgotten castle. Though my voice barely cut through the winds, I regretted opening my mouth. I didn't quite know why. The frantic shuddering on the platforms as someone clambered up to meet me instilled a deep, imminent foreboding. I somehow hadn't realized before, but the ropes tied around the bars I clasped onto were actually those of a rope ladder. They whipped into the cliffside, heralding the arrival of the figure who'd just pushed their way out from under a rotten blue tarp. A disheveled and wild-eyed man pulled his way up the wooden rungs, patchy bundles of matted hair swinging around his face. When he saw me, he paused, wired eyes suddenly morphing into something rabid before continuing up the ladder with fervor. As if dislocated, his jaw dropped wide open and flopped around on its hinges. I didn't know what that expression meant, but suffice to say, I was horrified. Those eyes, they betrayed hunger. I flopped onto my back and fumbled with the zipper on my bag, tearing out an ice pick and sleeting myself. 2 sets of blackening fingers curled over the rim before me, followed by this bestial visage of a human climbing up onto the snow in all his wiry might. Hey, what are you doing there, lad?" I chuckled with transparent unease. He almost looked surprised after I spoke, as if language was a foreign concept to him. He sucked air in through his teeth with a hiss. Cold, so hungry. You, warm, fresh," he spat in a gravelly voice. I backed up, raising the ice pick clutched in both hands. The man went a few uncoordinated steps before lunging out of nowhere and diving on top of me. I yelped in fear, falling backwards and raising the pick horizontal in defense. Spittle sprayed from yellow teeth, gnashing inches from my face. Acting swiftly, I rammed the blunt handle of the pick into his throat, causing him to recoil. Only a second later, he persisted with all his rage, seeming to shrug off the blow to his jugular as though it were an insect bite. In the scuffle, he managed to grab my right arm and sunk his teeth into my wrist. I screamed and let go of the pick with my right. Instinctively, I swung it in my left, the sharp end sailing true and embedding directly into the side of his neck. Viscous blood exploded over my face as I wrenched the pick back towards me, tearing the front of his throat open in a ragged gash. The man shot up straight in response, stumbling uncontrolled back to the edge and dropping limply into the open air. Despite my close call, something else disturbed me. The blood that had poured onto me was cold. I don't mean lukewarm, cold, if not freezing. No steam rose into the air as one might expect. It just curdled and froze on my clothing. With no other choice, I crept back to the rope ladder and looked down. A ratty woman had just climbed up into view and paused after seeing the man's body on the platform.
Ugh, god damn it. Again, Kurt?
What she said took me aback, but the bubbling laugh from Kurt was the kicker. Throat practically non-existent, he was alive and laughing.
Hey, sorry about him. You can come down. It's safe.
I almost joined Kurt in his hysteria. It was such an absurd proposition. Safe? You're dangling off the edge of a cliff.
Let me rephrase. Safer. Trust me, you don't want to spend another minute up there.
What? Nah, screw this. I'm out of here.
Are you? Are you really? Take a look around. Where in the name of God do you think you are right now?
No idea, but even if my chances are 1 in a million at getting home, I'd rather die out there than stay here.
Me too, traveler. Me too.
With that, the conversation was over. The woman turned her attention to Kurt. I refused to witness any more of this madness and stormed off back up the slope I'd come from. After a few steady paces, I stopped dead in my tracks. Something was off. Imperceptible movement in the snowfield. Distant thuds growing nearer. I squinted to make anything out, but I didn't need to. There, near the buried tent I'd crawled out of, the falling snow outlined an absence. Empty air. A strong gust flung pale dustings off the ground to form a haze, and in it, the shape was clear. I couldn't tell you what it was, only what it resembled. Serpentine in form and of simply vast size, it coiled through the haze the way an air bubble darts through water. 2, maybe 3 sparsely spaced legs jabbed out of the ground, leaving clear imprints of whatever this thing was. Scythe-like mandibles sliced through the air towards me. It wasn't a hallucination. I could hear its sharp limbs clacking, feel its heavy steps through the ground. I reneged on my words and scampered back down the ladder. Vertigo be damned, I couldn't stand up against whatever the hell that thing was. The girl was still tending to the man whose throat I'd torn out and shot a glance over to me.
Told you.
She said with an ill-fitting smile. What the hell is that? I couldn't see it. Well, I could, but...
It's fine. They won't come down here.
I sank to the floor, if it could even be called that, and a sudden wave of despair overtook me. I hadn't the first clue where I was. Something deep in the recesses of my mind doubted I was even on Earth anymore.
I'm Eleanor, by the way.
Shaking, I looked over to her with a grimace, then promptly winced from the pain of freezing wind whistling through my teeth. Nicholas, how are you so nonchalant right now? How long have you been here in this hell?
How long? Hell if I know. Time doesn't have a say anymore. Not for me. It's not as if clocks work here, even if I wanted to know the time. A day could be months, years, and a night could be 5 minutes, or vice versa.
There's not many things a man can do when faced with impossibility. Do you deny, to enkindle self-detriment, or accept and give up so easily? A question of hopeless fight versus hopeless submission.
Look, how about you come down with us, get some shelter? I know it's not optimal, but believe me when I say it's a paradise to living up there.
Before, I had Rob to guide me. Whether he's still in the world I knew or he's here somewhere, I don't know. I should hope he made it out, but the coward in me also hopes to see him in this cursed place, to let him take the lead, and the same cowardice in me chose to stay with Eleanor, Kurt, and the rest. The rope ladder ran down through entry level. A group of us sat on a 9-foot square base of cobbled ply and sheet metal, enclosed by flapping rolls of sun-bleached canvas and tarp. A room by some sliver of a margin. At the time, there were 6 of us. A paler, sharp-faced man introduced himself as Aaron and spoke on behalf of Kurt. The hunger, you see, it breaks you down. However strong you think you are, you'll never win against it. To eat anything substantial is a godsend, let alone something warm. Of the remaining 2 were Naya, a tan woman whose dappled skin displayed mild vertigo, and an older gentleman bearing several tight pink scars over his hands. Same for his face. Well, what could be seen of it past a graying beard. He doesn't remember his name. Everyone calls him Iago or Santiago. Something Hemingway. Never read his books myself, but as far as wind-beaten fishermen go, Iago certainly looks the part. It took a while of idle chatter for me to finally come around to the question seeping through my thoughts. So, how do you survive here? 8 words were all it took to derail the conversation and have them exchanged pitied glances.
Ain't a matter of surviving, son.
Iago rasped.
It's a choice between lesser evils.
I was exacerbated. What does that even mean, you old... Iago's sunken eyes toppled my will, and I trailed off. He huffed, more with fatigue than frustration.
Try as you might, it can't die in this place.
I went to bite back, but swallowed my words as I remembered Kurt. He laid beside us under a dirty sheet. Naya must have caught on because she reached over and tugged the fabric down to reveal Kurt's injury. Now his ruined throat was filled with what looked to be ice, only the ice looked tainted, putrid almost, with sallow mycelia exploding within. Crimson tributaries forced their way through the frost, up on the left, down on the right. Tingling dread crept in a similar manner, up my spine and neck, and flowing back down through my chest. If this was reality now, then, well, I don't know. What moral is there? What sadistic law of nature permits this? With no other choice, I've learned quickly what to do and what to avoid, either empirically alongside my fellow captives or from their lessons. Actually, just whenever we need to, we set out in the snowfield above in alternating groups of 2 or 3. Oftentimes, the invisible creatures moved to someplace new, leaving the path clear for us. I'd let them use my ice picks, though. I'd made it clear that if it was my turn, I'd always have one in hand. The third member used some kind of socket wrench with a sharp stone driven into the end. The iceberg is possibly the most treacherous ground I've ever had to traverse. Fissures hide under deceptive snow overhangs. One misstep on such unstable ground means falling 100 feet into an icy casket. That wouldn't be so bad, since you could eventually climb your way out. Only the boar worms that tunnel deep inside the ice are quick to snatch up anything coming their way. Worse still, those see-through monsters come and go as they please. I myself have been caught, 8 odd times? The way their mandibles carve and cleave, they must be serrated, because it hurts. It really hurts. And I'd rather not experience the sensation again. But we have to go searching. We have to. Most of the time we find little, usually nothing. A beaten metal sheet or frost-blackened planks are cause for celebration. You see, our cliff dwelling doesn't stay by itself. If only it were that easy. No, the iceberg is sinking constantly at a glacial rate into the abyssal brine below. Perpetual snowfall packs itself down into the ice over time and roughly maintains the iceberg's elevation. So we have to deconstruct, dismember the lower levels and lug them back up to the top. Drive old rebar into the cliff with blunt objects and fasten everything back together. If that's not work enough, the whole iceberg sways imperceptibly over time. It tilts forward to precarious angles, resting for a drawn-out solstice before tipping backwards again. Lose your presence of mind, and there's no second chance. Down into the freezing waters you go, torn apart by scaled monsters with their jagged spines and shark's teeth. Never blessed with the mercy of death until every cell in your violated body is torn and strewn asunder. Of course, there's a respite when the iceberg leans backward. It's not something to get complacent with. Listen to that nagging reminder tell you that at some point, you'll be back in the same spot. That's your survival instinct talking, obsolete as it is. And even then, when you feel prepared for anything, this place always has an ace up its sleeve. My first introduction to this concept was, it was a while after my arrival. I'd like to embellish the memory, to say we were sitting around a fire, something to that effect. No chance of that. Even behind cover from the wind, it's like the warped physical laws here outright forbid sparks and flames. No, I sat beside Aaron and Naya on a pile of salt-crusted clothes. Without much else to pass the time, we'd engage in half-hearted games and hobbies. Contrary to his appearance, Iago had a strong singing voice. I'm kind of amazed he can remember any songs. The man can't recall his own name for Pete's sake. I guess it's like Alzheimer's. Music's the last to flee memory, or so I've heard. At the time, he stood out on the platform before us. He was singing. I think it was Green, Green Grass of Home. In spite of the choppy gale, his voice carried. It was pleasant. This song in particular rang with poignant nostalgia. Once Iago finished, he stood with his hands held together. Hey, pretty good, old man. Aaron cheered. Naya nodded her head in agreement. Iago chuckled, and for a fleeting moment, our troubles were lost. I guess we were too distracted to hear the heavy shuffling from below, because we fell back to silence when an enormous hand wrapped around the edge of the platform. Whatever pulled itself over that edge, it was no creation of a sane god. Gray, blubbery flesh rippled in the wind. A disgusting, bloated thing the size of a tractor tire peered over at us. A head. Scattered perforations in its side must have been ears, but it had no facial features other than a burbling, X-shaped hole right in the middle. 3 more sets of hands clambered their way up to us, somehow crawling up the ice as if it were a gecko. None of these details held a candle to what their overall features resembled. Infants. Elephant-sized hellspawn toddlers crawling on all fours. Laggardly with age, Yago had no chance. Swollen, sticky fingers curled around his body, squeezing him in a grasp even world record strongmen couldn't escape. The awful harmony they made upon claiming their new plaything is etched into my soul. Gargling coos of childlike elation, deep in pitch and easily drowning out Yago's hysterics. In the brief period before they left, I watched, oblivious to the screams of Naya and Aaron, as the creature shook him around and pulled at his limbs. All I could hear were joints and bones snapping, cracking. The creature holding Yago brought him up to the dribbling hole on its face. The hole dilated, revealing a cavernous passage of dripping flesh, and, with slowness I'm sure it was intentional, pushed Yago inside, feet first up to his neck. It closed around him with such pressure I could hear his body breaking, and with crushed lungs he couldn't even scream. And just like that, they descended, leaving us with a cold, empty space shaped like an old man. That's how it goes here. No mercy, just suffering. Endless, indiscriminate suffering. These are a handful of things we can predict, or at the very least, expect. It may be logical to melt the ice and drink it. We are, after all, still subject to thirst and hunger, despite needing no food or water to live. Fresh snow from up above is okay, but the ice is bad water. It's rotten. It putrefies and becomes teeming with disease. In particular, it hosts some kind of parasite. Drink it and they'll start breeding inside you until your organs are rife with them. They sap any moisture they can from your body, drying you into a shriveled husk. Oh, and they're permanent. Literally no way of getting them out. I mentioned boar worms before. They're not an issue most of the time. Sometimes, if you look deep into the ice cliff, you can see them burrowing within. They're lightning fast though, so I can never get a clear picture of them. From what I can gather, they're long, thick, and leech-like. Their heads open up to reveal strangely mechanical sets of spike balls which spin against each other to grind through the ice. I don't know if they're immune to the parasites. Maybe they're symbiotic. Worm eat ice, parasite take water, who knows? This nameless hell has fates of plenty, except one: death. I didn't know how it worked at first, but it later on became clear. Months, perhaps years after Yago's abduction, something happened that was gut-wrenching and incredible in equal measure. About 25 feet from us, the ice began growing outwards. A small mound at first, swelling like rotten pustules. It was when a familiar visage began forming that it clicked, and we built a walkway across. Through some uncouth law of nature, Yago grew in the form of an ice sculpture. Then color flushed his skin, starting at his fingertips and slowly spreading. He eventually broke free with a crack and a pop and fell down into our arms, vacant-eyed and nude. A grotesque and wholly unnatural birth. Yago was never the same after that. Deference held our tongues from prying, until the curiosity got too much to bear. Even when he prodded him, asked him what had happened, not one incoherent word slipped from his lips. I shudder to think about what might have happened during his absence at the hands of those abominations. Things that considered him nothing more than a toy to wear out. We've taken to calling them blubbers. I'd say it describes them to a T. With a honed skill at hiding, they're not too hard to avoid. The problem is hearing them approach before they arrive, because if you don't, well, no need to repeat what's already been said. Past that, a worse revelation came to light. No matter what we do, no matter what happens to us, no matter how violent or peaceful the death, we'll return, spat right back out into the fray every time, no matter what. The brutality displayed in this realm is nothing to be scoffed at, but at the very least, you grow accustomed. Meat and bone lose their sting, and yet there are some things the scars can't toughen you against. One in particular stands out to me. Kurt and I were out on a scouting trip. We'd long since made amends by this time and agreed to let bygones be just that. Plodding along the ridge of a snow dune, Kurt cocked his head to look at something, then grabbed my shoulder with a wary firmness.
Get down. Now.
We both dropped down below cover. I hadn't seen anything, but by now I trusted Kurt's judgment. What? What do you see?
Caught it in the corner of my eye. Thank fuck I ain't look at it.
Without thinking, I went to peek over into the open snowfield. Kurt tore me back by the scruff of my jacket, bringing me to eye level.
The hell'd you doing, you fucking oaf? Don't look at it.
I stared, confused. At what?
The uncoupled. Should really get Ellie to go over.
Whoa, slow down. Uncoupled?
Yeah. Don't look too deep into the name. I only seen it in the corner of my vision before. Just a dark shape. Nah, more than that. A stain. A stain on the world.
Carefully, I turned my head in the direction he'd seen it, as if I'd be able to see right through the snow. Okay, if you can't look at it, how do you know?
Been plenty here before you, mate. Knew one or two of them. This kid called, Kent, yeah. He looked. Said it was hollow. Sort of an empty imprint that might have once been a person. I think he said something along the lines of, it's like if you took someone and stripped everything away except their being. Still not sure what he really meant. But it's enough to know I ain't never gonna look at it. Well, that and the fact that a moment later, he's already 30 feet ahead and stumbling toward it.
Pausing to let Kurt's words sink in, I muttered, where is he now? I mean, Iago got taken, and he came back. He shook his head, eyes focused on nothing.
Couldn't tell you. Only way I even remember him is because of his voice. Screams. God-awful wailing. Surfing across the dunes and through the air. In those short times when the wind stumbles, if you just listen.
Following his lead, I cocked an ear upward, frostbitten air slicing past my skin. There was nothing other than the howling gale and the hammering of my heart. However, the longer I listened, I picked up on something distinct from the wind whistling. It did sound like screams. For all I know, Kurt could have just been pulling a sick prank. It's easy to hear things that aren't there, to see what you want to see. Only, as I focused, it began to morph into the tone and timbre of a scream I still remembered. One I remembered well. It was the last voice I'd heard before this all happened. I tried not to think about it. Help me. The words were hissed straight into my ear. It startled me so bad my legs straightened and I hopped off the ground. No question that time. It was his voice. After that, it wasn't a matter of not thinking about it, but of trying to forget. I must have been in a trance when Kurt spoke up again, snapping his fingers.
Hey, you alright? Come on, we should get back. Ain't seen nothing out there worth the risk. Just, if you ever see something in the corner of your eye, something darker than dark, leave.
I nodded, grimacing, and we made our way back to our home. If constant, freezing snowfall wasn't enough, the weather knows worse cruelty. For the most part, we have shelter if it starts raining anything untoward. If you're caught out in the snowfield, though, well, let's say you'll be back in a few weeks at best, months or years at worst. That happened one time while Eleanor and Aaron went scavenging. They must have been on their way back when it started raining these razor-sharp ice shards, finger-sized blades that sliced through the canvas and embedded deep into wooden platforms. Pained snarls from above heralded Aaron's arrival, the rope ladder quivering under his descent. The best way I can describe how he looked was as if a shrapnel grenade had detonated 3 feet in front of him. Well, all around him, really. Deep, weeping gashes littered his body, and strands of flayed skin danced in the wind. It was like looking at a mangled, human-shaped version of those cheese strings. You know, the ones you peel off. I wish I could taste one of those again. Anyway, There wasn't much more we could do except bandage him up. Even then, it was more so we didn't have to see his injuries. I realized in my stupidity something we'd overlooked. He was alone. Naya asked where she was. He sat there, lifeless. It could have been the bandages wrapped around his head. I think he was just too broken to register the question. With his throat and chest a pulpy mess, Aaron's voice was a little more than a grating rattle. Didn't make it. Ankles, Achilles, all sliced to shit. She fell down a ravine. Naya just stood there, letting her head loll back, and let out a forlorn wail into the sky, one of transparent despair and indignance at this reprobate world, one I felt all too closely. I remembered looking into the ice and seeing torn flesh dangling from a boreworm's mouth. Dull pink smudges carried through the ice as they tunneled. A while later, 2 or 3 weeks at a guess, her rebirth began. It seems that whenever this happens, they aren't too far away, 30 feet tops. I don't want to jinx it, maybe it's luck. More likely, it's just how this place works. I dream sometimes of being reborn from the ice, only to fall out rigid and lifeless. But all we get are failed miscarriages. There's one thing I find worthy of putting on paper, and that is the storm. It happens at random, according to Kurt. There's no pattern to its visits. I've only witnessed it twice in my time here. The first time it swirled on the distant skyline. I found myself totally wrapped in its magnificence, a terrifying sight to behold. We'd been imprisoned in a night that must have lasted at least 2 or 3 years, relatively speaking. And in accordance with the darkness, the only light being the bruised, moonless firmament, it took a while for the black clouds to register, congealing across the waters. Well, it wasn't hard to notice after deep crimson flashes lit up in its bowels. Pulsating vermilion glimmers, so full of energy that I could feel heat wash over my face from across the waters. That heat grew into a roiling whirlwind as the storm neared. The others were quick to stir from their meager shut-eye when they too felt it.
The hell's that?
Oh no, please God, not again, Aaron croaked. Guys, what's happening? What is that out there? I asked.
Storm's coming,
Yago said. We all turned to him in sync. Those were the only words he'd spoken since he returned from the blubbers. And the mere sound of his voice came as a shock. We pressed for details, but he'd already sunken back into his dead-tongued dejection. Kurt was no help either. He just shivered and stared paralytic into the churning depths of that stormhead. I'll be honest, after the storm drew nearer and patting rain replaced the snow, a certain excitement overtook me. Inky blots darted across the flashing lights deep in the storm clouds, captivating me in awe. I threw my head back and opened my mouth, allowing the rain to splash its warmth across my tongue. It felt heavenly. The sensation of warmth after so long deprived was like nothing I'd felt before. The euphoria was short-lasting, and concern replaced it as the raindrops turned scalding. When they started to burn and sizzle off my face, I flinched and dove back under the cover. Before long, the air was an all-encompassing haze of steam. It was like we'd entered some malfunctioning steam room. Each breath brought with it a flaring heat that spread from my lungs to the rest of my organs. It's funny, isn't it? In winter, it's cold and dreary, and you wish it was summer instead. Then when summer rolls around, the beating sun and stifling nights make you yearn for the colder seasons. In that boiling cloud, I begged for the cold to come back. At least we could layer up in the coats and pants. There was nothing to be done about the heat. You can't exactly take your skin off when it's too hot. Momentary relief came as cool, trickling streams from above. My relief was sorely misguided when I understood what it was. Meltwater. Minor runnels quickly inflated to a formidable downpour, then into a violent rapid. Nothing could be heard over the roar of rushing water. Blind, breathless, and panicking, I reached out for a hold. My fingers wrapped around metal, a pole driven into the ice. I held on with everything I had, but there was a thump beside me, a gurgled shriek. Eleanor. Despite my total exertion to keep from being swept away, I outstretched a hand. "Ellie, grab my hand!" I said, a candle in the wind to the rapids. Without delay, I felt her slippery fingers intertwine with my own. I heaved. I felt as if my spine would snap right there and then. I didn't have the strength. The cold torrent sapped all of the excess energy from my muscles.
Help me!
Following the cry, I barely made out Kurt clinging helplessly to a torn canvas. The steam swallowed him up again, and my stomach knotted when a harsh tearing noise scraped my eardrums. In total, uncut despair, I watched as Kurt plummeted past the platform and out of sight. As if on cue, Ellie's fingers slipped away. My heart felt as empty as my palm. Her screams faded from my ears, replaced by the incessant torrent. I don't remember the wait following. Only the waterfall suddenly abating, giving way to a familiar gray murk hanging in the sky. Kurt and Eleanor were gone. In any other situation, I might have found solace knowing they drowned, or perhaps even died on impact with the ocean. Of course, that was out of the question. We were left knowing with absolute certainty they were going through unimaginable suffering, and far more to come. Whether at the hands of unseen leviathans, blubbers, or any other nameless thing lurking in the depths, it didn't matter. I just hoped whatever found them was vicious enough to tear them apart, digest their bodies into nothing, and allow them to return. A week passed, and Eleanor began to regrow. Another 2 weeks later, Kurt appeared. After their rebirth, we all knew better than to prod. Just leave them be. Let them process it. Let them decompress. Loss may seem a trivial affliction without death, but I would be naive to think of loss as a purely physical separation. Yes, you may be taken away, put through unspeakable suffering, and then be reborn, but for lack of a better term, those victims lose some integral part of their being, slowly chipped and whittled away. Something so abstract, so important, yet it cannot be grasped by the hand. Once it's gone, there's no reeling it back. And still, we went on. We had no choice, and fell back on mindless habits for comfort. In a way, we found paltry success in learning what makes this place tick. Trial and error. However awful those trials have been. My thoughts lingered on the storm after it happened a second time. We were seasoned, prepared for what was to come, making sure our cover was uninfiltrated by the elements. We pulled together ropes and twine, tied them around ourselves, and fastened the ends to various driven poles and stakes. Maybe I'd been too focused on the storm and its sizzling droplets to catch Iago unfastening himself and standing up. A yell from Aaron brought me to attention, but it was too late. Iago, already several paces away, lumbered toward the edge of the platform. We all thought he'd jump, futile as it be. He didn't. Instead, he threw off his shoes, socks, jacket, and pants, everything, until he stood stark naked, exposed to the elements. At this point, we knew better than jumping up to help. We had no fault in this. He'd come back eventually, after all. Yet I could sense something changing. I don't know what or when it started, but it was there. A shift. A redirection of energy. Iago howled as his skin bubbled and blistered under the storm's ferocity. I think it was when his skin began sloughing off in great swaths that it happened. Without warning, Iago's entire being burst into a furious red flame, a sparking vermilion plasma crackling with the intensity of lightning. Eyes watering from the heat, I watched transfixed as his silhouette, shrouded in hellfire, seemed to be eaten away into nothing. Not a puff of smoke or steam bellowed from him. His backlit shadow disintegrated inch by inch until the last smattering of fragments were burned away entirely. Absolutely nothing remained of Iago once the storm passed. Not one stray hair or nail fragment. Of course, we expected him to grow out from the ice face, right away in fact. Nothing happened. We scanned every last inch of the cliff. Nothing. It's been... hell, I can't even guess how long it's been since then. It's all so damn arbitrary. Meaningless. Could be decades, centuries, millennia. My family might be long dead by now. Hell, humanity could have already gone extinct. And in all that time, I've yet to see a hint of Iago's return. Maybe he's in another, worse place. Maybe he's dead. Or maybe he made it back home. Those are the only possibilities I can imagine. And as far as I can see, that's a 2 out of 3 chance of escaping this place. Escaping eternity. Next time the storm comes around, I think I'll follow that old man's example. Strip down to my most human form, raw for the whole world to see. And maybe, just maybe, the rain will set me free.